Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1458 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very big news yet again. We have seen that U.S. forces are on high alert today as Iran has begun deploying their drone attack ships. Also, we've seen major U.S. naval bases in the region evacuated in Bahrain. And also, the Russian forces are collapsing still to this day amid major Ukrainian offensives, and it is not going good for them whatsoever. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of absolutely significant developments from every single corner of the globe, as we did get to hear major news and developments today from the Middle East, that the United States of America is now poised and primed to be able to conduct immediate strikes on the Islamic Republic of Iran offensively, and is also prepared to be able to conduct defensive actions in the case of an Iranian counterattack or a first strike that may be conducted here within the next few days. It appears that according to all information that we were able to access today, U.S. strikes are immediate or imminent at this moment, as U.S. forces have evacuated out of the naval stations in Bahrain and the air bases at Al Udeid in Qatar. These very same actions were done right before Operation Midnight Hammer, around 72 to 48 hours before Midnight Hammer was conducted as a successful military operation, meaning that at this moment we could see from this point onwards, starting from about 24 hours from now and beyond, the U.S. Armed Forces could be conducting strikes on Iran at about any given moment. We literally will be, as of this point right now, prepared to conduct a strike on Iran to any means, any capacity, any length of time, and any duration and intensity from the next 24 hours onwards. We have also been able to see that the U.S. is claimed to be considering a wide variety of strike options, including limited several-day strikes or a one-day overnight strike, or a multi-week long air campaign meant to completely destroy the Iranian government and Iranian military's capabilities capabilities. We've also seen that the Israelis are conducting some preemptive action of their own by trying to target and knock out Hezbollah forces before the war begins with Iran. That way, if the war begins, the Hezbollah forces will not be able to respond by firing smaller rockets into the Israeli air defense and trying to help the Iranians to overwhelm Israel's air defense systems, including Hezbollah's incredibly short-range Qassam rockets. We've even seen that within the areas of Bulgaria and also Greece, near to the city of Chania on the island of Crete, we've also seen significant U.S. military buildups, and the Sofia International Airport in Bulgaria has now been officially closed to all civilian traffic, effective immediately into the immediate future for military operations. We've also been able to hear of other significant developments, as the Gerald R Ford has been confirmed by picture evidence to have slipped through the Strait of Gibraltar today and is going to be making all available speed to the Eastern Mediterranean, meaning that it will most likely be arriving sometime around Saturday or Sunday. We have also been able to hear additional developments from elsewhere in the world, as the United States has hit another alleged narco-terrorist vessel within the Eastern Caribbean Sea, and we've also been able to see that the United States is trying to give at least one minimal chance at an off-ramp from what we've been able to hear. We have heard that apparently they are willing to allow Iran to keep a limited nuclear program as long as there is no way that it could clearly lead to the development and production of nuclear weaponry. Outside of that and inside of Europe, we have also been able to hear of other significant developments within this area, as we have been able to hear that the Polish have withdrawn from all landmine treaties effective today. These actions had already been in the works for months, but as of today, the Republic of Poland has officially withdrawn from largely every landmine treaty that they were a signing member of up until several months ago, and they are beginning the production of anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, in quote, for the protection and national defense of the Polish Republic. Additionally, we've also been able to hear out of the Russian Federation that the FSB is taking further control of communication systems, which is even furthering our belief that some sort of a major calamity is about to happen in Russia, either economic or some sort of a political announcement by Putin in the form of a full mobilization that may lead to a heavy amount of public dissent that the Russian government is going to attempt to put down. We've also seen that the Ukrainians have wildly hit the Votkinsk missile manufactory today inside of the Votkinsk city area, all the way near to the Ural Mountains. This is another 1,000-mile deep strike that the Ukrainians have been able to conduct, and it appears that they are trying to hit and knock out the only factory, or one of the few in Russia, that conducts final assembly of Iskander ballistic missiles. We've also seen another facility within the Samara Oblast at Neftogorsk, which is an oil depot, apparently also being hit and catching on fire as well. Belgrade is still in a blackout, and now the thermal power plants of Rostov-on-Don are under a direct attack, and the city of Krasnodar came under a heavy attack today as well, with the Ukrainian forces inflicting a significant amount of damage onto the city area. We've also seen the Ukrainian armed forces were able to inflict significant casualties onto the Russian armed forces, and according to frontline reports today, the Ukrainian armed forces now boast that 300 square kilometers of ground have now been retaken from the Russian Federation in the ongoing offensive after the Russians lost Starlink and also banned WhatsApp and Telegram, which appears to be the largest offensive in terms of ground gain that we have seen ever since the summer of 2023, 3 years ago. Largely putting the ball in Ukraine's court, at least as far as strategic and tactical gains are concerned for the moment. But with that in mind, we are going to be making sure to get into all of our major news that we have over the course of the day, starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on down into the smaller stories of the night, as tradition has always dictated here on the channel. And so with that in mind, it is time for us to move on down and into the area of the Middle East, as we have been able to hear the news today that we were generally waiting for that will let us know that strikes were going to be coming imminently soon. Many months ago, or more so about 2 months ago at this point, it feels like it was forever ago, we started to see that the U.S. began to make open statements against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the massacre that they conducted on their own people, which then evolved into, once again, trying to deal with the nuclear programs that they're still working on, and generally trying to curb the Iranians' nuclear development capabilities. According to the United States of America, they were preparing to strike all the way back about a month ago, or even 2 months ago at this point, but we did see that that was not happening, and there were many different elements that we were looking for on the channel as far as analysis was concerned that would give us an idea that strikes were going to be incredibly soon. For one, there had to be significant airlifts into the region to be able to see that there was enough U.S. forces, offensively and defensively, to be able to conduct a wide variety of actions against Iran and also protecting our allies in the region. Additionally, we also stated that there would have to be, at a minimum, at least one carrier strike group, possibly even two, that would have to be within the region for strikes to begin. region. And finally, the last most important thing that we spoke about on the channel for about the past month and a half was the evacuation of the naval station in Bahrain and the few U.S. vessels that are currently there at the moment, and also the evacuation of the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The evacuation of these bases is incredibly important, at least considering the ongoing tactical situation within the Persian Gulf, as if the Iranians try to mine or attempt a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, or it is believed that they have a large amount of anti-ship missile batteries within that area, these U.S. vessels would largely be stuck in the Persian Gulf, largely like fish in a barrel, and for that reason, they would be susceptible to a great deal of Iranian fire and may eventually be overwhelmed and sustain significant damage or be sunk due to that heavy fire. For this reason, it is always a necessity that U.S. naval forces that are inside of the Persian Gulf have to leave before the U.S. begins any strikes against Iran. That was seen the last time during Operation Midnight Hammer, and it was also seen during the prior Iranian strikes that were conducted in 2024 against the State of Israel way back then. We have seen that that's happened just about every time. We've also been able to see that as well, near to the Al Udeid area in Qatar, evacuations have also been conducted significantly as well in that region. We have been able to hear that today, evacuations are now officially underway within Bahrain and also within the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, as according to the New York Times, there have been evacuations at the cluster of U.S. bases in Bahrain that house the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. Currently, we believe that there is about 3 LCSs, or littoral combat ships of the Independence class, and about 1 Arleigh Burke and a couple of Coast Guard cutters that are currently inside of Bahrain at the moment. All of these vessels are moving out of the Persian Gulf and will be making their way through the Strait of Hormuz possibly within the next 24 to 36 hours, meaning that once they exfiltrate the area of the Persian Gulf and make it into the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, the U.S. will not have any naval assets that could be at a great risk of damage or being destroyed due to the war that would be coming. We've also been able to see that the Al Udeid Air Base, which is an incredibly important one for U.S. operations within the Gulf, has also been evacuated as well, although that post, apparently the specific one that I chose, about 3 or 4 of them that we had on our Twitter page, was deleted. However, those evacuations are being conducted at the moment, and we have been able to hear that from multiple news sources in the United States of America today. This specifically is the Al Udeid Air Base. It is just to the southwest of Doha, Qatar, and it is a very large U.S. operational facility for U.S. forces within the area. However, while it is a large operational facility, we have never seen Al Udeid fully occupied and manned in the midst of a ongoing conflict with the Islamic Republic of Iran, either in the 12-Day War or during Midnight Hammer, which are our most recent examples. This is why we see that the U.S. is evacuating the area, is generally because the Iranians could also fire a significant volley of weaponry at the Al Udeid Air Base, and due to its close proximity to the Islamic Republic of Iran and its coastline, the reaction time would be fairly limited, and it wouldn't really give a lot of time for U.S. Air Force assets to attempt to shoot down as much of the incoming air targets as they could, and then to allow for the U.S. Army ground air defense batteries to clean up whatever was left behind. For that reason, a lot of these aircraft and a lot of the personnel are being packed up, and they're either going to be moving out to Jordan or Saudi Arabia, somewhere further on and a little bit a ways away from Iran, maybe by a couple of 100 miles, to once again give a greater amount of response time for air defense forces if the Iranians start conducting counterattacks or preemptive strikes, considering that it does appear that the U.S. will be bombing Iran imminently. We have also been able to hear of some other details about these ongoing developments, as it does appear that right now the force deployments by the United States within the Middle East, according to Bloomberg, is the largest force deployment that the U.S. has ever amassed in the region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, meaning that this is the
Also, not only that as well, but I also heard today another metric that the amount of stratotankers that are currently in the Middle Eastern region right now is exactly twice the size of the amount of stratotankers that we saw right before Midnight Hammer was pulled off that kicked off the 12-Day War with Iran and Israel. So it's a lot of forces there. And also, by the way, it is the biggest. In fact, I think it might be slightly larger than what we had right into the lead up of that 2003 Iraq War. It's really insane.
It really is something insane. It's absolutely crazy to see, and it is actually true. Matthew is saying a correct statement here that I was actually about to say, to add on to the news that we were getting just a second ago right there, is that this is the largest aerial tanker deployment that we have seen within recent years. It is twice the size of the carrier, well, more so stratotanker deployments that we have been seeing right before Operation Midnight Hammer, and it clearly is showing to us at the moment that the Islamic Republic of Iran is most likely going to be under a heavy and prolonged air campaign by the United States here within the near future. The U.S. did have a large amount of combat aircraft that were present within the theater during Operation Midnight Hammer and the 12-Day War, with a large amount of those forces being based primarily out of Jordan and Saudi Arabia. But even still, the amount of U.S. aircraft and U.S. forces that we saw present within this area was not as high as what we're seeing right now. We actually believe that over 25% of the deployable combat power of the United States Air Force is currently within CENTCOM, and that's a very rough estimate. But we can also tell y'all with a verified statement that 1/3 of the deployable portion of the combat fleet of the United States Navy is currently within the Middle East right now. That is 1 in every 3 warships that the United States has that is currently sailing the seas at this very moment. All of them are currently inside the Middle East, which is an incredibly large number to see, without a doubt. We've also been able to see by satellite photography that there are heavy U.S. air presences that are showing up. These satellite pictures were largely provided by, you know who, it was the Chinese, and they started to put these out over the course of about the past day or two to be able to show the world what really is kind of going on. And considering that this did come from the Chinese, OPSEC has already been blown on this. We're not violating any OPSEC by showing this. Generally, if a satellite picture is taken by another country and then published to the general world, there is no operational security at that point. But we were able to see here, this is what the airbase, specifically the Prince Sultan Air Base, looked like on the 10th of February of 2026. And this is what it looks like right now on the 20th of February, and there is an endless volume of stratotankers that we can visibly see on the tarmac. And I also have to point out that there is a large amount of additional aircraft that are probably here as well that we really can't see at the moment, because if you look down here at the Prince Sultan Air Base, you can actually see these larger open-air tarmac ramps where these aircraft can largely park and just stand by, but there are a large amount of covered awnings over here that can house a wide variety of multi-role air superiority and ground-attacking aircraft, which we cannot see by satellite and picture evidence. This is also why, folks, it's great to have these sorts of covers over an airbase, because it largely negates the ability for enemy countries to be able to see or exactly what you have at an airfield. So these little canvas covers not only protect the aircraft from the heat, but they also make it a lot harder for satellite imagery from, say, the People's Republic of China to be able to identify and show to the public exactly what we have within this region. A pretty good thing for OPSEC.
All Russia can do is look at this and weep. They have nothing like this, by the way. All their stuff is out in the wide open. You can view it from satellite. Also, you can hit it too, because you know exactly where it's at. So Russia just can look at this and just hope that they have something like it.
I mean, you know what's kind of crazy, Matthew, is that this Prince Sultan Air Base has about the footprint of an entire international airport. I mean, it is a fairly sizable one. 2 full-length active runways, and also a large supporting tarmac, and also hangar space for aircraft to just stand by and wait to be able to conduct operations elsewhere. To let y'all know, folks, this is actually something a little bit interesting. The U.S. back in the day, if I understand this correctly, actually gave the Saudi government a little bit of extra money so that way they could build out a lot of their air bases, including Prince Sultan, within the Middle East, to be big enough to not only conduct operations for their own Air Force, but to also have enough space to spare for U.S. force surgings into the area, considering that they're a part of the security assurance sphere. So this is the reason why Prince Sultan is such a large size, to where it can support a myriad of not only Saudi Air Force aircraft, which are fairly numerous, but also U.S. Air Force aircraft that are brought into the area. We also were able to see something similar within the Muwafaq Air Base inside of Jordan. And this picture came out today showing us a large row of F-35 Lightnings, and you can also see here that while these covered awnings generally do protect most aircraft from being visibly seen, there are a lot of them that either have their noses or their butts hanging out of the tents on the satellite pictures, which gives us a little bit of an idea of what's here right now. We can see that there's not only F-35As, we would assume in the United States Air Force, that are currently present, but there are also some F-15E Strike Eagles. We can actually see the rear tail sections hanging out from the back of the tents. We can also see a larger number of F-16s, and we can also see a massive number of nose cones sticking out of the awnings here on the upper side of the image, although we can't exactly tell what those are. The nose cones of the F-16 and the F-15 generally have the same profile looking from the top down. The F-16s is just a little bit wider, and it'd be really hard to tell the difference, especially from a satellite that's taking this picture at this graphical quality from orbit. So a little bit hard to say exactly what's in those top row of tents, but we can confirm that there are F-35s, F-16s, and F-15s at Muwafaq alone, which generally would be comprising an entire strike package. It appears that at the moment, a lot of people are largely getting the idea that because of the evacuations of U.S. forces out of vulnerable locations like Bahrain and Qatar, and also due to the heavy U.S. air basings that are being seen inside of Jordan and Saudi Arabia, which was also indicative of Operation Midnight Hammer's impending reality that was going to be setting in the midst of last year in the summer, a lot of people are wondering when this war starts, because there's no doubt about it starting now. How long is this going to last? Is it going to last months, days, hours, an hour, minutes? How long is it going to last? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so just to reiterate this, right now the current U.S. military deployments near Iran are the biggest that have ever been seen in the region since the start of the 2003 Iraq War. So the question is, now that the U.S. has pretty much decided it's going to attack, because you don't make deployments like this unless you've actually given the order to carry out these attacks, how long do you think this will last once it gets started? 41% said the Iran war will last merely days, while 35% said the Iran war will last a few months, and 14% said the war will last a year or maybe a few years at that. So it looks like most people think it'll last merely days, which is a pretty short time frame for a war, which would presume it's going to be a shock and awe strategy. But just to give you an idea of exactly what's in the region, right now we're seeing 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, we're seeing 12 warships, we're seeing hundreds of fighter jets, multiple air defense systems, literally stationed everywhere throughout the entire region. We're also seeing 150 plus U.S. military cargo flights, another 50 plus fighter jets in just the last 48 hours alone, and also that includes F-35s, F-22s, and F-16s. And obviously that is a massive loadout right there. So this is huge. Like, there's no mistake about this. This is not a quick operation. This is a very big preparation for perhaps a multi-week air campaign on Iran. So this is a little bit interesting. This is definitely going to be fascinating when this kicks off. But back to the poll question, though. I ultimately think the war might last a little bit longer than just a few days, because Iran has a lot of ballistic missiles right now that they've restocked with. They have over 5,000 at least ballistic missiles in their stocks, and that will be something the U.S. will have to contend with. So I'm with the 35%. It could last up to a month or perhaps more than that, just because of how stocked Iran is with their ballistics. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that this sort of an operation, being optimistic, probably would only last for days. Of course, if we're saying the goal is to completely destroy Iran's military and governmental and administrative capabilities, it would probably only last for days. But I can tell you all this. If the U.S. military is left to its own devices, they never take a chance on anything. They're not going to keep an operation going for days. We could have conducted an air operation against the Iraqis in 1991 for a couple of days, and then steamrolled them on the ground with the U.S. Army, and that would have been a surefire reality. But we generally like to operate off of a doctrine of what is called superior firepower, and that means that we will throw as many bombs as necessary at anyone anywhere until there's basically nothing left standing and no one left alive, and then once that's done, then the Army rolls in, if the Army even rolls in at all. And generally with U.S. Air Force air operations, much like any other battle or war that we fought over about the past 80 years, we generally emphasize a superior firepower doctrine, meaning that we will take an exorbitantly long amount of time to do something that we already achieved within the opening days of that operation, meaning that once we bomb the Iranian military and the Iranian government into basically cinders and generally rubble, we will keep bombing those cinders and rubble for weeks on end, maybe even months, until we are definitely sure that there's really nothing that even poses a threat at that point to U.S. interest, and then the United States, if they move in on the ground, will start to move in after that. With the amount of forces that are currently there, and what we generally know about right now, it is highly unlikely that there are any large amounts of U.S. ground forces that are currently there, which heavily removes the idea that there will be any sort of a ground incursion into Iran. If there is, it's mostly going to be fairly limited using special forces, considering that those are used in far smaller numbers than the regular army. And so for that reason, we're definitely not going to be seeing that U.S. forces will be moving in on the ground. But I have a feeling that due to the amount of forces, stratotankers, and multi-role aircraft that we have present within the area, along with all of our ground-based air defenses and so on, this operation looks to be aiming to last for a pretty long time, and it is going to be what a lot of people would describe in the public as a shock and awe campaign. But this time, it's not really going to revolve around low-tempo air operations like, say, with strategic bombers like the B-2 Spirits. These air operations that are coming up are going to revolve around what is the backbone of the U.S. Air Force, which will primarily be the F-15s, the F-16s, and also the F-35s and the F-22s for air defense. That is generally what we're going to be seeing here in the near future, and that means that the attacks are going to be conducted across the entirety of the Islamic Republic of Iran for about weeks on end, highly likely. We'll probably also
Also,
see...
by the way, I was going to mention something here. I heard today there's been a lot of misinformation running around, by the way. Like some people have noted this. There have been so many conflicting reports coming out today, like about the strategy that the U.S. might use against Iran. Some are still going with the shock and awe strategy, and I think that's the one they will probably end up using. But they're also alleging that the president might decide to go with a limited strike against Iran, which I'm a little bit on the fence about that. I'm not really sure if that's really something they would go for, because the amount of forces they've deployed doesn't indicate a limited strike. It indicates a very large strike. So that doesn't make much sense. We also heard a third strategy today, a speculation that maybe the U.S. might go specifically after the Ayatollah and the mullahs and go try to take out them and eliminate that whole threat, and then see what happens after he takes out the top government officials. So I don't know. To me, it seems like they're going to go for shock and awe. They're going to go all out. Like, it seems like it's going to start off with a huge bang to me. I don't think they're going for limited, at least from what I'm seeing.
I don't think they're going to be going for a limited operation either. I don't think that that's going to be the case at all. And I also have to point out, folks, that air operations that last for weeks are generally beneficial because a lot like crushing a roach, once you crush one roach, the roaches begin to scatter. And some of them that were sitting still that you might have not noticed a minute ago, they're going to start moving, you're going to start noticing them. And that's generally what Army and, well, not Army, but generally military intelligence and even the CIA would be able to pick up on, is once we start crushing a couple of roaches in the opening days in Iran, a lot of the other roaches are going to start moving around. And then that makes it a lot easier for the U.S. Air Force to find them, locate them, target them, and then destroy them with that provided intelligence. So generally, I would say that we're probably going to be seeing that this is going to be a longer intensity air operation, and one that's been a long time coming. The Iranians clearly are not going to give up their nuclear weapons programs. They've made that incredibly clear through 2 attempted negotiations at Muscat, Oman, and in Geneva, Switzerland in prior days, and they do pose an imminent national security threat to the United States of America over their continuous funding of terrorist forces within the Middle East, which are attempting to destabilize our sphere of influence within the region. Also, their continued actions and developments in terms of nuclear weaponry, and their endless pursuit in trying to produce and field an intercontinental ballistic missile that's capable of striking the continental United States. And not only that, the crimes against humanity that the Islamic Republic of Iran has conducted by killing 40,000 people about last month. So quite obviously there is some action that needs to be done, and I believe that it's going to be quite soon at this point. But nevertheless, a lot of people are also talking about the Iranians and their counterattack capabilities, because saying that the Iranians are going to get hit doesn't really add into the fact that the Iranians do have the option, at least within the region, to be able to try and hit back. We do understand that according to a very recent report, the Islamic Republic of Iran has around 5,000 missiles that are available to fire. I want to make it clear that we do not know how many transport erector launchers, TELs, they actually have to be able to fire off those missiles. So they might not have a large number of TELs, which are basically the rifles and the missiles are the bullets in this sort of a equation here, to be able to fire off a large volley. We actually don't know how many TELs that they have, but they do have a large amount of missiles, at least according to what we've been able to ascertain. And it looks like a lot of people are wondering if generally coalition, if we were to call it that, air defenses throughout the region, including Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel's, Qatar's, Bahrain's, and Kuwait's, could possibly be overwhelmed by the Islamic Republic of Iran in some sort of a counterattack or a preemptive strike with their missile forces inside of Iran. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so Israel is assessing that Iran has over 5,000 ballistic missiles, which I have coined the Crayola arsenal, because it seems like they have every shade of color, or every crayon color there is, possibly with their missiles, which look like crayons, honestly. So they're saying, or at least Israel's claiming, that their air defense will be overwhelmed if Iran tries to launch most of those missiles. And what are your thoughts? 41% said it will be manageable damage, but still bad, while 30% said that will cause severe damage, and 23% said the U.S. and Israel will neutralize them all. And the trick is with this, even though Israel hypes up their air defense quite a bit, and it is potent, like the Iron Dome system and David Sling, that is a very potent combination. But we did see during the 12-day war that it got overwhelmed, not by the missiles necessarily, it got overwhelmed by the cheap drones that Iran keep firing at their system. So they had damage last time. It was pretty bad damage, actually. So That shocked some people, but I would say I'm with the 40%. It will be manageable damage. And also, by the way, that is the reason why I speculate the U.S. waited for all these aircraft carriers to get in position, because we have double the aircraft firepower this time around. During the 12-day war, we had only about half of what we currently have in the region. Now we've doubled it. So, take it, leave it, double it, whatever you want to call it. We are now able to protect Israel's airspace much better this time because of those air assets being moved into place. And also, we've had the chance to move air defense, ground-based air defense, into place as well. So there will still be damage. Make no mistake about it. Israel will get hit, and there probably will be incursions into their airspace, but it will be manageable. I'm with the 40%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd agree with the 40%. The damage is most likely going to be pretty decent, but it also will be manageable because we did see in the 12-day war that the Islamic Republic of Iran, generally, to be entirely honest, they easily overwhelmed Israeli air defense back then. It was actually in the opening day that they overwhelmed Israeli air defense, even with a decent amount of coalition air defense support for the Israelis. And for that reason, I'd have to say that the Israelis particularly are going to be taking a decent amount of damage. But I'll be upfront with y'all. I don't really think that U.S. forces, at least in this scenario, are going to be taking really any damage at all in their U.S. force basings in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. Because U.S. Army air defense forces, from what we know right now, are primarily based around U.S. force buildups in Jordan and Saudi Arabia, at least on the ground, not in Israel. And that means that the air defense forces, specifically the THAAD batteries that are based around Prince Sultan, down just south of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, are going to be out of range of trying to expend their missiles to defend the Israelis. So I generally believe that while the Israelis will take some damage, it will be manageable damage, but the U.S. armed forces will probably not take any damage in the midst of the engagement that's soon to come. I do also want to point out really quickly, well, a little bit of an interesting thing here, is that Israel does not seem to have learned from the prior incidents that it's had in 2024 and 2025 when the Islamic Republic of Iran conducted significant attacks on their nation. Back then, we were generally criticizing Israeli air defenses for not being modern enough, because both in 2024 and 2025, Israel came under significant attack by Iranian missile barrages and drone attacks over overwhelming periods of, well, short but overwhelming periods of attacks. This led to Israeli air defense largely being inadequate to deal with the situation due to all Israeli air defense systems being missile-based interceptors. This greatly limits the amount of weaponry that they're able to shoot down that's coming into their airspace, because missiles are fairly expensive. And not only that, missiles are a lot, I guess you could say, difficult to rearm, meaning that it takes more time. And that means that Israeli air defenses, one, are exceedingly expensive to operate, and secondly, Israeli air defenses take a long time to reload. And for those two reasons, we saw that Israel had some pretty significant issues in both 2024 and 2025. And we have seen that over about the past 2.5 years, the Israelis have still not invested in any sort of modern anti-drone defense systems like self-propelled anti-aircraft guns. Those would be pretty easy for Israel to get.
Actually, they have. They have a new system that has entered combat deployment. It is the Iron Beam, but I don't know, Matt, how many of those Iron Beam systems actually have in use. We don't know that. That is a classified thing that they're not really telling the public for obvious reasons. But the Iron Beam is Israel's answer to the drone incursions. But the problem is, though, I'm not sure if you really want to test that system in a real combat scenario. It seems like a very high stakes thing to do, but I think that's what Israel's planning on doing. They will use that for the first time in this upcoming incursion that Iran intends to conduct into Israeli airspace. So from what we know, by the way, the Iron Beam is a 100 kilowatt laser, so it's pretty powerful. This thing's got some firepower behind it. In laser terms, that's pretty strong. That's like you hit some drone once, it blows the thing up, basically. It's very powerful. So that is the cost-effective way that they've determined to take out these drones. I think that is the future of drone defense, is lasers, but like I said, they're testing it at a very critical time, so hopefully it works the way they intend, or otherwise it could be a disaster.
I would have to say that it's probably not deployable or usable at the moment, because the Israelis actually, I'm thinking back really hard to remember this, because I remember that they stated the Iron Beam was in use in full deployment, and I think that was during the first Iranian missile attack on Israel, which happened way back in 2024 when Israel killed Nasrallah in Lebanon. The Iranians conducted an attack on Israel about 3 days later, and the Israelis were saying in the midst of that attack, "We have pushed forward the Iron Beam in the service, and it's going to be here to defend the airspace." And then when we saw the 12-day war start a year later, basically to the day in 2025, we never saw any proof of the Iron Beam in use. And to be entirely honest, I think that the Iron Beam is more so of a propaganda weapon than anything right now, because
Oh
it
no.
seems like beyond the prototype videos of a proof of concept, we haven't seen any of them being mass produced and deployed in larger numbers in Israel that we've ever seen proof of.
Oh no, no. They now that is a good point. Like we don't know exactly how many of these Iron Beam systems are deployed around Israel, but keep in mind that Israel is not a huge landmass. Like it has a wide range of borders to protect. But on December the 29th of 2025, literally right at the end of last year, they put the first few systems into actual combat deployment. So it is actually deployed. Like it's actually out there this time. But whether or not they have enough to actually make it worthwhile, that's another question entirely. We'll have to find out. Also, the Arrow 4 is apparently going into deployment soon as well. I'm not sure if it'll be in deployment before these attacks start happening because I think it's still being deployed as we speak. And that's also not really a drone defense system. That's more of a missile-based defense system. So I think the Iron Beam will be used, but that's why, like I mentioned, we've also brought in the aircraft carriers because we have to have the traditional air-based air defense, the F-16s, the F-35s. We need those there as well to supplement any type of failure that the Iron Beam might have. So that's why we moved that stuff in. And also Israel, I'm sure, was begging in the background for us to move that stuff in. So we did for that reason.
And also, I've seen some people in the chat. This is always a fallacy that I've seen a lot of times, and one that I think that's always worthwhile of addressing because it's one that it would seem to make sense until you start to dig into it a little bit deeper. And it's the old and classic saying of, "Well, Iran has 5,000 missiles, and clearly that would do a lot of damage if they fired off all of those at one time." I have 5 million bullets right now, but I only have one rifle. How much damage could I do in 5 minutes? Not a lot, because I will not be able to fire all 5 million rounds of ammo out of a singular rifle in 5 minutes. It's physically impossible. And that's the same problem that Iran has, is that they have a bottleneck in terms of their availability on that rate of fire. They cannot fire all 5,000 of those in an overwhelming first attack, basically every single one of their missiles, in that first initial attack and overwhelm everyone and completely destroy them. They only have about 70 TELs, which is basically the rifle in this sort of a weapon system. That means they can only fire about 70 missiles at a time, maybe at the best. They might have been able to get their hands on a couple of others since the 12-day war, and that might increase the number up to about 100 or so, but we understand that their ability to get a great amount of TELs is fairly low, meaning that the highest amount of missiles that we could see fired in any singular moment is maybe 100, and that would be about 100 per day, by the way, because it would take about an entire day afterwards for them to be able to rearm the system, get the GPS coordinates put into those missiles, and then drive them back out to their firing locations and then fire off the next volley. That means that we would only be dealing with about maybe 100 missiles fired per day, meaning that they could keep that rate of fire up for about a decent amount of time, probably about 50 days or so before they completely expended their stocks. But outside of that, that's also not considering that there is going to be what's called attrition. Attrition is a military term meaning that forces are eventually going to wear themselves down or people are going to die. And that's something that always goes into the equation when we talk about military terms, is the attrition rate. And as far as the attrition rate is concerned, we did see that the Iranians did lose about 20 TELs out of about the 70 or 80 of them that they had during the 12-day war last year, just from Israeli airstrikes alone over a 12-day period. That means that their abilities to be able to fire off a large volley of missiles at Israel or the United States or anyone in the region within 12 days have been reduced by about 30%, meaning that they wouldn't even be able to have enough TELs to survive long enough to fire off 5,000 missiles, because once again, they don't have enough rifles to be able to fire off all of the ammunition they have in the quickest amount of time that they would need to be able to actually overwhelm and completely destroy US or Israeli forces, or to completely expend all of their ammunition. And that's generally a fallacy and an argument that I've seen throughout the internet for weeks now, is that the Iranians have 5,000 missiles. Clearly, that'll be a lot of damage. You know, someone can have 5 million bullets, but they only have one rifle. They're only going to be able to fire so many bullets at a time. But outside of that, a lot of people are also talking about whether or not the president has generally issued the order already to strike Iran. You know, it looks like it. I mean, naval forces being evacuated out of Bahrain and Qatar, that's a generally open and shut sort of a book there about what's going to be happening soon. We really don't do that unless if a strike is happening incredibly soon. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so like the enforcer mentioned, the question is, has the US president likely already issued the order to attack Iran? And 73% said yes, and 27% said no. And I would argue that the order was likely issued weeks ago. I've seen several news articles today claiming that the US president could authorize strikes at any moment. That's just simply not the way these type of things work. In order to get this into motion, they had to give the order to deploy all these forces. And on top of that, they already had to go ahead and start scheduling the attack time frame that they were going to go for as well, because there's clearly a plan behind all of this. It's not just being moved into positions so that way the president on a whim can decide, I feel like attacking today, I feel like attacking tomorrow. He probably leaves the timing up to the military, kind of like he did with Venezuela. The military was the one that controlled the time frame on that. They were waiting for good weather, and once the weather became really ideal for the attacks, they conducted the raid on Maduro's house. So I think the same thing's happening with Iran. They're simply waiting for enough military stuff to get into place and the right conditions to be met, and then they will carry out the president's order. I think it's been given already. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say really quickly, let me check on something really quickly, because I was about to kid around and, oh, so yeah, good. This is exactly what we were looking for. So right now, the moon is currently in its waxing crescent, and I was about to make a joke that the U.S. has to wait for the stars and the moon to align and everything, and then I sat there and thought in my head, I was like, wait a minute, we actually do wait for the stars and moons to align for a strike, because the thing that's a little bit interesting, folks, is that moonlight actually is a factor in military planning, at least the light that the moon reflects from the sun back onto the surface of the earth at nighttime, and that also means that usually we don't find it ideal to open up attacks against an enemy force with a full moon. We generally look for the moon to be at either completely darked out, which is a new moon, or something of a waxing and a waning crescent, meaning that the minimal amount of light being given off by the moon is currently being seen. And right now, we're in this phase right here called the waxing crescent. That's actually this weekend right now, and next weekend, it probably would be within the new moon cycle. So right now, we're seeing that there is a very minimal amount of moonlight that's going to be reflected towards the surface of the Earth, and that also means that right now would be an ideal time to start bombing Iran, because it's going to make it even that much harder to even see who in the world's bombing Iran in the middle of the night, which is going to be the proud aviators and pilots of the United States Air Force, Navy, and Marines. But outside of that, it would make it a lot harder for them to see exactly who those pilots are and also what aircraft they're flying to be able to try and shoot at them. So I would have to say that the orders have probably already been given, and also, like Matthew was saying, the president, it doesn't have like these mythical powers where he's just like, bomb someone, and then it happens literally within like 30 minutes. There's a lot that goes into preparing a military operation and then starting pretty much a full-on war. There's the stars and the moon that have to align for the larger part, or generally just the moon. There's also the fact of the weather. The weather has to be ideal for military operations to commence. Generally, we want clear weather, and also weather that's not incredibly turbulent. And then we also want to look for all of our forces being in the area, and for us to have overwhelming firepower offensively and defensively, meaning that the enemy, whoever we are that we're going to be fighting, really can't inflict any damage on us, even if we're going into an offensive or if they're shooting back at us. So all of those things have to be put into factor in equation, amongst many other things as well, for us to be able to say, all right, this is the perfect time to conduct a war. Let's start it right now. And that's generally what we're seeing at the moment.
And also, if the president wants to operate, like, for example, on a whim, like where he's like, okay, I just want to attack tonight. Let's just go in a few hours. It's like the military, like he may be the commander in chief, the president, but at the same time, the military leadership is going to object to that very, very strongly, because they don't want to do anything that's going to put their guys at risk like that. Because if the operation goes wrong, who's going to be blamed for it? Not just the president, but also the top generals that were leading the operation. They're going to get blamed as well. So they don't want that on their shoulders or on their record. So they're going to strongly object and tell the president, we have to wait until this date. And most likely, even with the president being kind of a little bit, stubborn, he probably will bend that objection, most likely, because he doesn't really know the ins and outs of the military, and the military generals do. So the military actually has a lot of power, like to influence the decision making here. And I would imagine that even though the president has a very, like I mentioned, a stubborn personality, he probably does defer quite a bit to the generals, especially Raising Cane, who right now is the top liaison with the president. Probably a lot of leverage between those two.
And also, here's another thing that a lot of people have to consider. Imagine how bad that would look, considering everything that's going on, always in politics, and there's always a huge amount of pushback to whoever's the president, but particularly right now. Imagine if they just said, "I don't care, bomb them tonight," and then the U.S. wasn't ready, and hundreds of U.S. service members get killed over the next 3 days because the U.S. wasn't ready to defend itself from an incoming Iranian attack, and we also weren't really ready to conduct a successful offensive. So our offensive would completely fail, and it would be an absolute defeat. And then the U.S. forces in the region would be getting hammered by the Iranians in the days to follow. That would be an absolute failure. That would completely, basically, dunk on the reputation that the president may have with the rest of the public, because nobody's going to sit there and say, you see, the president was playing 4D chess after all by getting, 400 U.S. soldiers killed overnight because we wanted to do that to make the Iranians think we're weak, but we're really strong, and now we're going to be coming in with the real pounding here in a little bit. That's not how it works. Everyone will look at that like that was absolutely horrendous, and he had basically just thrown away hundreds of men's lives for no purpose, and for no reason, and there wasn't even any gain out of it. So that also is a huge part of the equation as well, is to make sure that we're absolutely ready, so that way, if it happens, it doesn't end up being an unmitigated failure, meaning that you still have to take all those factors into consideration like we were talking about prior. But moving on from that...
Do you think they'll wait for a weekday? Like, do you think, because we're still seeing today, by the way, folks, we're still seeing stratotankers and cargo aircraft moving into the Middle East, even tonight on Friday, which is kind of interesting because we thought that maybe it could happen this weekend, and it still could happen. It's very possible. We're seeing the evacuations from Bahrain, excuse me, from the naval forces. So that's a big sign that things are coming. But I wonder if they're going to wait for a weekday, because we had mentioned before that they're getting a little bit predictable about waiting until the markets are closed after Friday night and then into the weekend. That's usually when they've been conducting attacks so far. So they could be thinking in their own heads, we want to change it up a bit and maybe wait until a weekday. Because remember, I mean, some wars in the past have started like on Thursday evenings. Like, it's happened before. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to switch it up this time.
Man, at this time, man, instead of attacking from the east, Hexas going to order them attack from the west. Oh, excellent, absolute strategy, man. It's going to be something like that. Oh, man. I tell you.
Also, you see all the misinformation running around, by the way. Like today, there's literally like these so-called like reputable journalists that have been around for ages. It's like, you're telling me that they don't know what their sources are saying? Like, one journalist from one of these major mainstream outlets will say, there's strikes happening tomorrow. The next one will say, from another reputable organization, supposedly, they'll say, no, that's not true. You're all wrong. It's like, come on now. Like, y'all aren't getting that mixed up. Like, one of you is lying. You're putting out misinformation on behalf of the government, very clearly so. When this starts happening, when the confusion starts like that, that's usually a strong sign that something's about to happen, because that's usually when the whole OPSEC campaigns start, misinformation, intentionally to confuse people, including the Iranians.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, and it's always interesting to watch that, because you'll always notice, folks, that some people within the large mainstream news outlets, whenever a strike starts coming around, they either get really quiet or they just start saying the complete opposite. Like, they'll be like, oh, peace is on the horizon. We have peace in the Middle East now. Everything's good. Or they'll say something like, oh, the U.S. isn't doing anything that would clearly show that they're about to go to war. That's ridiculous. And then 2 days later, the Iranians will get bombed or something along those lines. So it's definitely coming around. Right now, the actual mainstream news landscape is so confused and mired at the moment. There's no question about it. We are in the midst of either preparing for the actual strike, which is coming incredibly soon, or we are going to be striking them right now, and we're already ready. It's one or the other. So with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of our news that we've gotten out of the area, as we did get to hear today that the Iranians did unfortunately execute 9 prisoners at dawn, who were executed today, and 7 were convicted of murder, 2 on drug offenses. Not officially announced, according to the Human Rights Association. Moving on out of that, we've also been able to hear that the USS Abraham Lincoln is still ready for long-term operations, and generally all U.S. forces within the area are ready for these operations that are soon to follow. The U.S. is trying to give a little bit of an out to the Iranians, but I also have to point out that the amount of forces that we have in the Middle East, or at least are preparing to conduct actions in the Middle East, are so large that we can't even put all of them in the Middle East, which is something insane. We've actually been able to see that in Crete, near to the city of Chania, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, we've been able to see that there are even U.S. military aircraft that are now building up on the island of Crete, which is about as close as they can get to the Middle East, but still showing that they are running out of room to even base U.S. forces in the Middle East on. We've also been able to see that the Sofia International Airport in Bulgaria has now been closed effective immediately, and we were able to see that the Sofia International Airport put out the following NOTAM. Runway 9 and 27, which I also had to point out that the Sofia International Airport is the only runway, well, it has only one runway, and it is runway 9 and also runway 27. It's the same runway, but it's numbered differently from both directions, and that's a huge rabbit hole to go into why that's the case for every runway in the world, but that's how runways are numbered. But nevertheless, the only runway at the Sofia International Airport was closed for all flights except military flights. That was the specific reasoning that was given right here, which is now showing that the Sofia International Airport in Sofia, Bulgaria is being used to ferry U.S. forces endlessly 24/7 either into the Middle East or into air bases incredibly close to the Middle East.
Yeah, what if I could tell you that I could actually bring you onto the ground there and show you exactly what's happening at that airport? Go check the top of the Twitter page. I've got you a picture showing the deployments that are currently at that base. As you can see, right, well, not the base, but the airport. But as you can see there, that appears to be a lot of stratotankers sitting there right on the side. I think that is right off the side of the runway. So that's a lot. And also, that's just a few of them, I think, that we're seeing there in that picture.
Let me see where that would be. Um
Also, by the way, Twitter rando struck again, it looks like.
Oh, let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can see any identifying landmarks. There's some parking lots. Oh, wait a minute. I think it's around here somewhere is where these aircraft are currently at, because there's a parking lot right here. There's actually a little building, like a row house, down there close to the area. Oh, it might be around here. It might be around here because there's that little row house building, and then there's one behind it, which kind of is right here. So this picture could have been taken from around here, near to this high-rise here, looking towards the airport. But it does appear that there are some larger amounts of KC-135s that are at the Sofia International Airport at Bulgaria, as this picture proves right here, which generally shows why the airport is closed for military air traffic. Twitter randos be working hard. I mean, like, I tell you, they'd be putting in those hours. I mean, hell, maybe the CIA ought to hire all the Twitter randos at this point to work for them, because I think they do pretty good intelligence gathering on basically everyone at this point. But outside of that, though, it does appear that we were also able to see that pasta and lobster is being handed out for some U.S. forces within the region.
Yeah, also, by the way, I have to give a caveat with this. Some service members hopped in the comments there because we will make a disclaimer. We have not served in the military, so we're not familiar with how they feed the soldiers. So apparently, according to veterans of the military, when you're on a forward deployment like this, like these soldiers right here apparently are in the picture, apparently every Friday you get fed really good top-notch food like pie, lobster, and crab and stuff like that. So that's apparently what's happening here. So it's not entirely out of the ordinary for deployed soldiers to get fed like this, but some people, including us for a little while, thought that maybe that was a big deal. So apparently it's not.
And apparently it isn't. But I do have to say that it does look pretty tasty. You know, the lobster, the steak, the taters, the key lime pie. Ooh, that looks
pie
good.
looks good right there. Honestly, it looks like it'd make you sick. Like, it's a lot of rich food right there in one sitting.
But I'll have to say this. It still looks bussin'. I mean, that is pretty good looking food. You know, folks, I've always heard that the food in the military is pretty good stuff. Is that true? I know that we have a lot of veterans here. Is that true, folks? Is it good stuff? Yeah, are those MREs good? You know, they're designed to keep you constipated, so that way you don't have to take so many trips to the loo on the battlefield. You know that, right, folks? Y'all know that, don't you? Of course y'all do. But anyways,
man, I'll pass on the crab, lobster, and the pie and all that. I'll take the scrambled eggs they put in the bag. You know, that type you shake up in the huge bag and like boil it and stuff. I'll take that. I'm happy with that.
And also, I see a lot of people saying, no. Yeah, you know, the whole thing about the food in the military is great. I've generally heard from folks that I know it's not that good. Sadly, you would think it's good, but apparently it's not. But outside of that, though, we have also been able to see that the Gerald R Ford has entered the Mediterranean today. There it is, out there. Would y'all believe that that's actually Africa behind it over there?
Really?
Yeah, you know, the Strait of Gibraltar is only 8 miles wide. It's actually thinner than the Salt Lake is. Like, here, I'll show it to you right here. Like, here is the thinnest part just about of the Strait of Gibraltar, and it is only about 9 miles across. I think at the shortest it actually is 8, because I've always heard that at the thinnest it's 8 miles across. That is compared to our Great Salt Lake here in Utah, which at its narrowest is, let's see, this would be about its narrowest from actual shoreline to shoreline here. From shoreline to shoreline, the Great Salt Lake is about 30 miles across. So kind of giving you all a little bit of an idea of scale here. Actually, as a matter of fact, Matthew, we measured the water that the Salt Lake currently encompasses at the moment. That is still 11 miles across from Antelope Island to Stansbury Island, which is a couple of miles wider even than the Strait of Gibraltar. So funnily enough, that is actually Morocco over there in the background behind the Gerald R Ford.
Oh, that's a beautiful scenery, by the way. This is the one that's been on deployment for ages, hasn't it? Like, this will be the one that's been on like the longest deployment for like decades, right?
Yeah, it might be setting the record deployment.
Yeah, so at least they got to see some beautiful scenery before they go into a hello situation, at least, because they're about to get bogged down probably for a while, and which is unfortunate because they've been out here for too long of a time, honestly. But they got to see some nice scenery and go through some nice areas, I guess. But they're about to have to hunker down for a long haul.
Yeah, they definitely are, and I'd have to say, I feel like folks, like, I feel like the military ought to be really generous to these guys because I'm going to tell y'all, a lot of people are always proud of their service in the military, but when it comes to stuff like this, considering that a lot of these sailors, the enlisted guys at least, are currently on a 4-year contract, which is the minimum from basically all branches in the military right now, a lot of them are going to be second guessing whether they want to re-enlist because this deployment here, folks, is actually going to be an entire quarter of most of these guys' enlistment periods. Maybe we ought to give them all some sort of not just hazard pay. I'm not talking about your normal pay schedules and stuff like that they give out normally. Maybe we ought to give them some bonus pay, especially if they set a record. I don't know if that currently exists in the Navy, but if it doesn't, I think that should seriously be considered because these guys are going to be out at sea probably for an entire year, maybe even a little bit longer than that. This is going to be setting quite literally the longest deployment record in modern history ever since the end of the Second World War. And I wouldn't like to think that a lot of these guys end up becoming, I guess you could say, disillusioned with the Navy, especially with the skill sets that they have and the experience that they'll have under their belt at that point, and then decide not to re-enlist. So I think that they definitely need to be given some special treatment, so that way they would feel happy enough to re-enlist once their contracts come up to term. But moving on.
But they already got the Warrior dividend, though. Like, remember, they already got the 1776 Warrior dividend. It wasn't special to the soldiers here or the sailors on the vessel, but everybody got one at least a while back. I'm not sure. Like, if anybody in here is active duty military, let us know. Did you ever get that Warrior dividend? Because I'm not in the military, so I wouldn't know if I got it or not because I'm not in it. But I'd be curious to know if that actually got paid out because we never really heard the end of that.
Well, from the folks I've heard, around the grapevine, no one's gotten it. So,
Really?
yeah,
like nobody?
Like, not that I've heard of. Like, nobody's told me about it. And when I asked them about it, which was a couple of weeks ago, no one had gotten it yet. So I don't think anyone's getting it at the moment.
Oh, it looks like a lot of people were saying yes, though. Maybe it was just some branches or some folks didn't get it yet. Maybe they'll get around to it.
Maybe they got it after the last time I asked a couple of weeks ago, because I'd been hearing that, like, everyone was like, no, I haven't gotten that yet. I don't even know about that, really. But, all the folks I'm talking to, folks, they were in some of the nice, the real cushy branches, I don't want to get into which ones, but I hadn't heard from them that they had gotten it. So it appears that a lot of people have, and it looks like a small number, like a tiny number, is saying no. But the majority is yes. Everyone's saying that they did. So moving on from that, it is time I'll have to go and check on my friends again now and see when they got it, because I guess it was after the last time I asked them, because the last time I had heard, they were all like, no. And then one of them was like, what the hell is that even? And I was like, well, it's like, well, you haven't heard of the money you're supposed to get? But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get on over into Lebanon really quickly as well, as we were able to see that the Israelis have been striking Lebanon significantly here within the last day, as they're trying to basically grind Hezbollah down to a nub so that way when this war starts, Hezbollah also can join in and try and overwhelm Israeli air defenses from extremely close ranges.
Also, by the way, Howard Mendelson said, "How much is 1776 after taxes?" I think it was tax free. I don't think it was. I think it was tax exempt.
But wasn't that the housing allotment money that they were supposed to get anyways, and then it was literally just taken out of that fund, repackaged, and then given to them in a different way?
It could have been. I'm not really sure. Yeah, possibly.
I mean, it's like if you were already going to get that money, it's like, did you really even get it? It's like, you were supposed to get it anyways. But anyways, moving on from that, we also saw that the Israelis were also conducting airstrikes within eastern and northern Lebanon. Take a look at that. We also saw in this clip as well a little bit of the video of the damage, and we also were able to see that as well in these clips here. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of that little bit of news in Lebanon, and then we're going to be moving on generally out of the Middle East for a moment and on into just a tidbit more of the Middle Eastern news that's been coming out from the rest of the world here really quickly. We did see that large amounts of flights were still ongoing today into the area of the Middle East. We were able to see a large number of C-17, C-5 Galaxies making their way in and out of the Middle East, and right now, folks, why heavens, the airspace is looking a little silent. Now, that's quite interesting. Huh. You know, Matthew, this airspace is so quiet here. It looks like it's the beginning of something. You know what I mean?
Possibly. But right now, though, it's 7:35 a.m. in Tehran. So it's just the break of dawn at this point right here. So the light is starting to shine, and I don't think the roaches are coming out during the day. So I have a feeling it's not going to be tonight.
Oh, no, I'm not saying it's going to be tonight. I mean, we've already passed that period. But, generally you usually see a winding down of supply and cargo flights into what's about to become active combat airspace, usually about a day or two before it actually goes down. And I'd have to say that right now, the flights that are going in and the flights that are coming out, they're far smaller in number, folks, at the very moment that we're on stream right now than prior days. I mean, even over here, most of the flights that are currently up that the U.S. Air Force is running, most of them are actually westbound back to the United States, and only 2 of them are eastbound heading towards CENTCOM. So this is an exceedingly small number of flights compared to prior days. So, a little bit interesting right there. It's making you wonder. It's making you wonder what's going to be going on this weekend. I don't mean to be saying a lot about it, but it looks like someone's going to be getting down to business. That's what I'm trying to get at here, folks. If you understand, like, put 2 and 2 together. At least let me speak English here. I don't know what the hell's going on tonight. I feel like I'm having a hard time speaking English. I think it's this tiny little headache that I have. But anyways, we also were able to see in Serbia that the Serbian government has also notified their citizens to depart Iran immediately. So everybody has been notifying their people to leave. Also, here's the direct statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Serbia. Due to increased tensions and the risk of deterioration of the security situation, it is recommended that all citizens of the Republic of Serbia who are currently in the Islamic Republic of Iran leave the country as soon as possible. That sounds like they're also getting the idea this is very soon around the corner right now. But of course, who's to say? This could be a month away. Folks. There's it could be a month away. It could be literally tomorrow. Who knows?
But the president said they had 10 days at the most. So that means they really probably have like 2 days.
Probably, yeah. And also, speaking of that, they did say that today. Well, the president said that today. And we also were able to hear that the president has also stated that they're considering a proposal that allows Iran a token nuclear enrichment if it leaves no possible path to a bomb, according to senior U.S. officials. The Iranians aren't going to take that. They aren't going to accept that at all. And also, I saw someone down here say low enrichment caps, 3 to 5%. That would literally be unusable. I mean, enriching anything to 3 to 5% would be completely unusable. You would have to enrich to a minimum of a 60% grade for most fuel grade nuclear material, at least from what we know. Some other reactors can operate on lower grade fuel, around the 40% mark, but 3 to 5%, I mean, you're literally doing basically nothing to the uranium ore at that point. It's hardly anything, and it would still be completely unusable. So the Iranians would never accept that if that was the proposition, because the Iranians would be saying, well, what the hell's the point of agreeing to that? We were literally axing our entire enrichment ability anyways, because it's such a low enrichment level that we're capable of achieving. But nevertheless, that is all of the news that we have gotten out of the middle of the East today. And it is time for us, folks, to move on into the rest of our news for the night. And we have some major news that's come out today. A little bit of news from the Caribbean, but tremendously large news that came out today from Ukraine. Ukraine just went and blew up basically the only Iskander factory in the entirety of the Russian Federation today. And they also have been causing the Russians some very significant headaches on the front, as they have now taken more ground in just about a week than the Russians have been able to take over the course of the past 3 years. So they're not really doing too well, at least the Russians are, and we're about to be getting into that news here in just a minute. But before we do, I do have to say a tremendous thanks to the 20,000 people who have been here live tonight, and also the 90,000 people who have watched this stream in the first hour and 9 minutes. Because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to have an audience to talk to. We wouldn't be able to tell everyone the news. And we're always entirely honored and extremely appreciative of the hundreds of thousands of people who come here every single day and the millions who come here every month to be able to get their news from this channel. We are very proud to know that a lot of y'all consider this channel to be your primary source of news. And if you're new to the channel tonight, please make sure to subscribe. I've said this yesterday and a day before, but this is a fairly true statement right now. With what's about to happen down in the Middle East, if you subscribe right now and hit that bell button, we run streams whenever anything happens that's major. Basically every day, we run streams at a set time, 10 p.m. Eastern time, 6 days a week, every day but Monday, covering the past 24 hours of news. So it's an incredibly reliable news network that we have here. We are literally on every day, pretty much without any fail. The last time we've ever had to cancel a show was, I believe, 4 or 5 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. But outside of that, we also go out of our way to break our schedule and go live immediately if something major is happening, like the U.S. is immediately bombing Iran or, capturing Maduro or anything along those lines. We go live instantaneously. So if you subscribe right now and hit that like button, here in maybe the next 2 or 3 days, or maybe next weekend when this actually starts, y'all are going to get a notification on the spot right when the first bomb falls that we're going live and we're covering the news as it's happening. So make sure to subscribe. It is going to pay off dividends for you, at least if you want to see what's happening in real time once this kicks off, because we are definitely going to be going live immediately once we hear the smell of gunpowder is in the air inside of Iran. But with that in mind, before we move on into the rest of our news, I do want to make sure that we take a little bit of a pause here and answer a couple of questions before we get on into all of the major news that we have for the rest of the night. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so getting our first 3 super chat questions here. Our first one is going to go to none other than Nick Hines. And thank you very much, Nick, for that very generous $100 support once again tonight. And we appreciate that very, very much. And Nick said, LSA forever, LSA for president and vice president. And I've heard that Russia has 4 months until economic collapse. And thoughts, kings amongst men. Oh, that's too high praise right there. Thank you very much, Nick, for that. We appreciate it.
Nick, that's incredibly high praise from our friend up there in Canada. I gotta say, we got a lot of friends up there in Canada, and I hope that you've all been doing well up there. I hear that Canada is beautiful this time of year with the snow all around. And folks, we actually finally got snow on all of our mountains around here. It's really cool. It looks like we're in a winter wonderland out here now. Really neat. And I gotta say, a huge thanks to you and your vote for president and vice president here in 2040. We're both going to be up for election in 2040. I'll be on the presidential ticket because I've sworn up and down that I gotta be. and of course, Matt will be the vice president. And then once I get done with my 2 terms, then Matthew will have to pick a vice president that isn't me, because if it was me, then that could create a constitutional crisis. And then he'll run for another 2 terms. So y'all will have nothing but
Actually, I was going to go for CIA director. At that point, nepotism will not be something looked down upon. It'll be celebrated. So we shouldn't have a problem at all if I become the CIA director.
Hooray! Like it's like nepotism. Beyond that, I do thank you unbelievably for the incredible support. Folks like you make this thing possible. We run an ad-free and sponsor-free show. It's folks like you who actually fund our operations and help us to do this as a full-time job. And I would have to say, Nick, that timetables like that are always rough to work with, and it would always seem like it would be great to have an idea of when is Russia truly going to collapse. And I've always said, ballparking it, it's maybe a year and a half from now. But the reality is that I don't even know, and that's really the best estimate that I can make. 4 months, I would say that the Russians are going through pretty hard times right now, and it definitely is, without a doubt, in 4 months they're going to be very bad off. But I'd also have to say at the same time, however, that might not be accurate, because there's a million changing variables when it comes to economics on a day-to-day basis. So while Russia might have survived 4 months from now on the current timetable, something might happen in the future, like maybe an easing of 1 or 2 sanctions that allows for them to extend that to about another 4 months, and now it's 8 months. And so I would say that I still would go with the idea that Russia will probably suffer a very significant collapse within a year. At this point, not a year and a half, probably about a year from now, and that will probably put them into a crisis mode. But I don't think it's going to happen within 4 months, because the Russian economic collapse so far has been happening surprisingly far slower than we expected. And so for that reason, I'm generally going to give a lot more leeway in our timetable, like we've been doing for a while now, and say that it probably would take another year from this point for the Russians to actually suffer about a complete financial collapse. worse. But that's my opinion, though, and I could be wrong. I mean, like, the high likelihood is that snowballing, or really crystal balling is the best way to put that. Crystal balling like that is almost always inaccurate. Almost nobody can get that right, because predicting the future is a very uncertain sort of a profession, and so many things change from day to day. The future changes day to day on what's going to be happening by tomorrow. So that would be my ballpark estimate, is maybe a year. 4 months sounds a little too soon to me, so I'd say that one's probably inaccurate. But if it happens in 4 months, I mean, color me shocked and surprised, and not in a bad way, it'd be in a pleasant way, because if the Russians financially collapse completely within 4 months, the war in Ukraine is going to be ending a lot sooner. But a huge thanks to you for the support, and also in our favor, which is the more important part of this whole thing, is that if it ends sooner, it's also going to be in our favor, because the Russians just won't be able to afford to continue the war. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Nick, and a huge thanks to you so much for those unbelievably kind words and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we are on and into the next one.
All right, and our second one here goes to Grand Moff Clubby. And thank you very much, Grand Moff, for that $100 support. And we appreciate you very much as well for that generosity. And they said, here is a great contribution from the Imperial Remnant. The White House needs to stop wasting time. And as soon as the USS Gerald R Ford arrives, they need to begin. Enough delays with these negotiations and all that BS. LOT, and long live the Empire.
Long live the Empire. Long live the Republic is what I love to say. It's a beautiful republic, and we have our problems from time to time, and sure, I mean, some people might not be too happy with the U.S. government either in this term or the last term, or people might not be that happy with the economy, but I'll say it, I'm very proud to be an American, not because of the government, but because of the people of the United States of America, from the cities to the countryside. All of them play their role in this nation every day, and we're always incredibly proud of them, I'd say. But I would also have to say, the U.S. has got to stop wasting time. I mean, this is truly something that would be ridiculous if, at this point right now, we then stalled again. I mean, that would be nutty. We just need to get on to it. And the Iranians are a huge threat. And I also got to say that a lot of people always come here and go, oh, this is something that I get, this is something that just gets me cracking up. Are you an Israeli? Was the war with Iran promised you 3,000 years ago? America doesn't have a bone to pick with Iran. These people must be stupid. Like, I just got to say that up front, because how in the world can you look at a country that ends every parliamentary session with the chant, death to America, death to Israel, as a friendly country? I mean, people literally kid themselves into delusions these days that Russia and Iran are our friends. You know what they would do if they saw you in real life, going over to Russia and going, hello, I'm your friend. I'm from America, and I really like you, and you like me. They go, that is great. Off the front line with you. You're now conscripted to special military operation. And if you go to Iran, they call you an infidel, and they probably put you in prison. They probably harass you because you're an American, because they don't really care if you like them or not. The thing is that you are an American, and they have a deep-seated hatred for anyone who's an American, whether you like them or not. And that's why it's really out of my court even to go, well, I mean, maybe there's some sort of a sympathetic thing to be had for Russia and Iran, because if I went over there, you know what the Russians would do? The Russians would probably put Matthew and me in prison up front because of what we said about them. They don't even respect the freedom of speech over in the Russian Federation for us to criticize them and then get away with it. We would basically go to prison immediately and then probably be executed in prison.
Oh, man.
In the meantime.
We'd get the dart frog treatment, I think. We'd end up like Navalny, probably, just disappearing off into the wild blue yonder one day, never being seen again. Then all of a sudden, there, he's gone. Nobody knows what happened to him. And it turns out the dart frog got him. But also, it's like these goofy arguments. I hear people all the time these days. They're saying, Israel just wants a war with Iran. They just want it. It's like, well, I mean, the U.S. really finds the war to be necessary as well because they're developing nuclear weapons. And everybody's always saying, oh, it's the defense industry. They're pushing for war because they want to make money. Well, I mean, obviously they want to make money. I mean, it's the whole point of a defense company is to sell weapons, but that doesn't negate the fact that Iran is actually, like the enforcer said, saying death to America, developing nuclear weapons, building up these massive missile cities that they currently have around their country, and manufacturing missiles at a huge pace. The only reason they would do that, by the way, is so that way they could attack Israel and our bases in the region. So nobody really wants a war. Nobody really out there that has any sense about them is like, oh yeah, I just love war. But sometimes they're necessary. Like, you can't shy away from them all the time. And also, we can't get so caught up with, Israel might want it or that or another. It's like, if it serves American interests, then we have to do it. That's the bottom line.
And here's the thing that I always find funny. Everyone goes, oh, the Israelis want it. Who gives a shit about the Israelis? I mean, I'm just going to be a little bit upfront here. Who gives a damn what they want? This has nothing to do with them. This has something to do with us. If Iran creates a nuclear weapon and they also have an ICBM to boot, that ICBM isn't going to be aimed at Israel. They can already hit Israel with a nuclear weapon if they make it. They're making that ICBM to kill me. That's what they're doing it for. And all of y'all. We're all a threat here. Every single one of us is in the United States. Because if the Iranians only had a bone to pick with Israel, okay, then that means they shouldn't be making an ICBM. But every single time we approach them about the topic of going, hey, why don't you just not make the ICBM? They go, hell no, we're not ever not going to make an ICBM. We're definitely making one. And what point would they have to do that? Their IRBMs can basically reach everyone in Europe, and their short-range ballistic missiles can definitely reach Israel. We've already seen that. The only people that they can't hit right now and kill are us in the United States directly with an ICBM. So that's why they're making one. I mean, like, for people who say the Iranians have nothing against the United States, well, why the hell are they trying to create weapons that will kill Americans in our homeland here? That generally goes against that whole argument. Because if they didn't have any bone to pick with us, why would they be going out of their way to develop a weapon that could kill all of us over here in the United States? That's my question, and there's no good answer to that, because they really do hate us, and they want us dead, and it doesn't line up with the whole notion that people are going around going, oh, the Iranians are just misunderstood. This isn't a modern Disney Pixar movie where the villain is not an actual fiendish bastard who's, who is just absolutely rotten to the core, and then it's just unfortunately misunderstood once you get to know a little bit about them. These people are inherently evil in the Iranian government. At least from our end, in our perspective, they want us all dead. They don't really care if you like them or not, or if you are sympathetic to them or not. So I would say that, for one, I don't really care. I'll make this clear. I don't give a damn what the Israelis want right now. This is more about us. We cannot let the Iranians continue to threaten our control of the oil flowing out of the Middle East, and we also can't let them threaten to kill millions of Americans with a nuclear weapon, because they get one, and they also have an ICBM to shoot it at us with. So I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. And I also got to say an unbelievably massive thanks to you so much once again for that humongous support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing rolling. And I hope that you liked my 2 cents on the analysis side of things here. And so let's see. And also I see someone saying, well, a lot of people in America care what Israel wants. But that doesn't matter. I mean, like, a lot of people care about what's going on in the UK, but that doesn't really matter either. I mean, like, those sorts of things, I don't really know why anyone cares. I'll just be entirely honest with you. And this is something that I always talk about every night. These are not countries we live in as Americans. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's like if Israel is a country that, say, has like the Shin Bet, and Netanyahu's a questionable guy and he's under criminal prosecution right now, that doesn't really matter too much. And if in Britain, they're doing one thing or another with that doesn't really matter too much either. We're Americans. We're looking out for American and Western interests, and that means that we're looking out for Americans that are living here in the homeland as U.S. citizens. We're looking out for the citizenry. So we generally, rub elbows with and, grease the palms of whoever we need to around the world to be able to go and do what we need, so that at the end of it all, it's benefiting the citizenry of the United States. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. And with that, we're going to be on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
And this one goes to Ted Marshall, who puts in a $50 support, very generous as well, and we appreciate you very much, Ted, for helping to keep the channel running with that support. He said, the State of the Union address is on Tuesday, and do y'all think that POTUS will wait until afterwards, that way he doesn't have to talk about it? And I don't think you'd have any reason to wait, to be honest, because I can understand where you're coming from, that he doesn't really want to say that he started a war. But the problem is, though, this thing is going to start nonetheless. There's too many assets in the region. So not talking about the State of the Union, I think, honestly, he might want to report success at the State of the Union. It's possible he might wait, but I'm kind of leaning toward the idea that he might want to say, we've done X, Y, and Z, and we're making good progress. That's a possibility. Some people have speculated that maybe he might order the attack or authorize the attack during the State of the Union on Iran, but I'm not totally sure or convinced about that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I'm also in the camp with Matthew there. I think that it's not really going to matter too much about the State of the Union, because the thing is that he wouldn't be able to claim that he's the president of peace in the next State of the Union after that one, a year later, because, the whole war with Iran thing is still going to be on everyone's minds, because this isn't going to be a short campaign, like a day or so. This is going to be far longer than that. And also, it's really hard for him to say he's the president of peace when we already bombed Venezuela and nabbed Maduro out of Venezuela. That already generally went against the face of that, and also the threats to annex Greenland also went against the wind of that as well earlier this year too. So that wouldn't really be a good claim already at a State of the Union. It would more so just be, look at how well we've bombed Iran. I mean, they're basically helpless at this point by the time the State of the Union comes around. So I think that no matter what happens, the State of the Union will just be structured around it to make it sound like an absolute success no matter what. So if it hasn't been bombed yet, then what we did with Venezuela and threatening to annex Greenland, those were great things. And then if we have bombed Iran, then those things are going to take the wayside, and they'll just be small additional points, and then we'll be saying, look how well we've bombed Iran. That's generally how the State of the Union will probably work, depending on whatever happens. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. A humongous thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on and into the rest of the news that we have for the night. And we're going to give you a little bit of an appetizer here in the Eastern Caribbean for our European news, as we were able to hear that the Southcom Command has struck another narco-terrorist vessel. This one had what appears to be 3 outboard motors. And oh, bam, there we go.
Oh dear, he says this was an appetizer. I'm not sure if this is an appetizer. I guess you could say instead of the blooming onion, this is the exploding onion. I guess you could say
something around that, or maybe it's that. Let's see, what is it? Maybe it's just the onion. Maybe it's
jalapeno popper.
Jalapeno popper. That's a pretty good one. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on out of the Eastern Caribbean. Just a little update there. It was a slam with a hellfire. The boat's out. So that's that. Moving us on into Europe now, because we do have a lot of news coming out of Europe. We have been able to hear some interesting developments for today. For one, the Polish have now officially, as of today, completely withdrawn from all landmine treaties, according to the Polish government, to allow for the defense against Russia. We do understand that they have already been in the works on that for a while, and they've already been producing anti-tank and anti-personnel landmines for a minute, but their withdrawal from the treaties was announced a couple of months ago and has gone into effect from what we know today. So now they're going to be moving on into developing significant minefields and defensive lines around Kaliningrad and the Belarusian borders, along with the Lithuanians, which are doing the same, to be able to prepare for the eventuality that the Russians might try an offensive through the Suwalki Gap area, and hopefully the Poles and the Lithuanians will be able to hold them off and keep the corridor open for as long as physically possible. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear that within the Russian Federation, it appears that the Russian government is trying to take further control, according to some Russian vloggers inside of the Russian Federation. Before everyone else, well, almost. Mobile operators are now required to disconnect communications at the request of the FSB. They will not be held responsible for service interruptions in such cases. The corresponding law was signed by Vladimir Putin. So it appears that they're allowing for even further control to be taken of the Russians' communication systems. And boy, howdy, folks, I gotta say, that is quite an interesting one, to say the least. It does appear that the Russians are really trying to cramp down on that whole freedom of speech thing inside of Russia as much as they can, and we believe that it is still because some sort of a declaration of a mass mobilization may be coming up here soon, maybe even imminently, and they're trying to meet that at the head so that way everyone can't become too outraged in Russia over that issue. We've also been able to hear, outside of that, that it appears that China is circumventing any sort of a trade embargo or sanction with the Russian Federation that the United States has leveraged by apparently working towards importing the equipment, I believe it is, to Indonesia and Thailand, and then having it shipped from there and into Russia. This is generally circumventing the sanctions that have existed in the past and allowing for the Russian Federation to still access a lot of dual-purpose goods, including a larger amount of FPV drones and also other forms of drones that the Russian Federation has been using against Ukraine. But before we get on into that topic and also what else has happened in Russia today in any further detail, I do want to make sure that we talk about this fairly large development that we're hearing about the Russian Federation's communications blackouts and greater attempted control once again. And once again, to recap this here really quickly to give the poll a little bit more time to get some votes in, it does appear that the Russian Federation is now allowing the FSB to generally tell mobile operators, which are the operators of mobile phone plants and such, to be able to disconnect communications at their request. And apparently, the mobile phone operators will not be held responsible for service interruptions in the event that the FSB does demand that they disconnect communications for specific customers. So it appears that at the moment, a lot of people are believing still that due to these massive attempts at control by the Russian government, there has to be some sort of a chance that mobilization mobilization is going to be getting declared soon, and this is why they're trying to get so much control of the social media space, so that way people can't become that outraged and then organize from their rage in Russia to be able to go against the Russian government. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the Russian sources are continuing to insist that Putin plans to call full mobilization in the Russian military. So what are the odds of that actually happening? 68% said there's very high odds of mobilization, while 12% said only if Ukraine keeps advancing will they fully mobilize, and 13% said there's very low odds of Putin ordering such a mobilization. And I would say there are clear signs that it's probably coming down the pipe. Right now, we're seeing that, of course, the FSB is trying to access all the abilities to cut off communications. We're also seeing that Telegram got banned. We're seeing now that Starlink, not really because of the Russians, but Starlink has left, so that's created a bit of a vacuum as well. So the communications are getting cracked down on quite a bit. That's a bad sign. Also, by the way, Ukraine has retaken over 300 square kilometers of territory from the Russians, and Ukraine's advancing rapidly against Russian defensive positions. So there is a legit reason for Putin to want to call a full mobilization to reinforce the defensive lines, so that way they don't collapse in the midst of this major Ukrainian offensive. So I'm going to say I'm with the 68%. I think the odds of this happening are very, very high at this point, and that would explain all of Putin's very weird actions that he's been taking over the past couple of weeks. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that there is a fairly high odds that mobilization may be declared at this point. The acts of the Russian Federation to try and control the social media space is becoming so suspicious at this point with how much they're trying to really gain control of it, that they clearly must be announcing something soon, or dealing with a situation that is evolving right now that's going to come to its apex soon, that could be a threat to the Russian government, and they need to meet that at the head before people can start to organize against the Russian government off of the damning sort of statement or news that's about to be coming out here soon. So I'd have to say that I'd be with 69%. There's a fairly high odds that the Russians are about to try and conduct a full mobilization, and that will probably not end up well for the Russian government, even if they try and control the social media landscape. Moving on out of that, though, we did get to see that while they're trying to control the social media landscape, the Ukrainians are generally leveling the real landscape that's left in Russia. We are moving into Votkinsk now, a really cool city, and a really cool place in Russia. It's right next to the city of Izhevsk. Do y'all know why the Izhevsk city area is incredibly important to me, folks? Do y'all know why it's important? Matthew, do you know why it's important?
That's where they have the poop factory.
Well, if you want to call it that. I mean, that's pretty close. But it's this giant factory right here. And this factory is really special. You know why, Matthew? This is the Izhevsk firearms factory of the Kalashnikov group. And they basically produce all the AKs.
That's why. It's the poop factory.
It is the poop. Well, I wouldn't say the AKs are absolutely poop. I mean, they're pretty neat. I mean, it's probably one of the few things that the Russians have ever made that's interesting outside of the Mi-24s. I mean, those are pretty cool too. But they produce basically all of the AKs of the Kalashnikov group here. That includes the AK-12, the AK-74. We don't really see AK-12s anymore. But the AK-74s, the AKMs, the AK-47s, which were basically never really produced. But they're all produced here in this factory. But just a little bit next door, just about, I think it's like 20 miles up the road, is the city of Votkinsk. And this is a really cool city as well. Here, in this valley, is another large factory. And Matthew, considering that Izhevsk, next door, produces rifles, what do you think this city produces in this factory?
I feel like this is trivia. This is like fill in the blank or something right
Yeah.
here. But it just happens to be that I know what they're creating here. I know what they're putting together. They're putting together some very spicy missiles over here. I think they're putting together Iskanders.
Yes, that's true, and they also put together some of the larger ICBMs of the Russian Federation here as well, but those are fairly rare these days. Most of the time it's more conventional orders like Iskanders and such. But the Ukrainians decided that this factory had a long enough time of existing, and Zelensky said, F Belgrade in particular, but also screw Votkinsk. And they hit it last night and blew the factory sky high. Take a little look.
Oh.
I think this guy had a job there. Like, he's like, oh my God, my paycheck.
Man, the total opposite. Usually they're laughing, but this guy's not laughing. This guy is cringing really badly. Also, by the way, I heard the Ukrainians use flamingos on this facility right here, if I have that right.
We think that they did. We don't know for sure, though. We didn't get in. I don't think we have any video. I'll have to make sure to check here on our next clip. I don't think we have any video of them coming in and impacting. It's rumored that they might have used flamingos, but the Ukrainian government hasn't come out and made an official statement on that just yet. And it seems that it's more so like just an ongoing word out there, a rumor in the street, that it was a flamingo, but we're still waiting for official confirmation on that. This is within Liudi range, so it could have been Liudis, but we also didn't really get any videos of Liudis yet, so it's a bit of a mystery exactly what it was, but it could have been a flamingo, a Liudi, or something else.
Interesting. Let's see it.
Бля, ну-ка. Еще летит.
Где?
Was that rocket fuel I was hearing?
Yes, that was. Ooh!
Oh, oh man. Very caustic chemicals getting in the sky at this point. Not good for air quality.
Oh, dude. Dude, it's like if you doubted it was a missile factory, you can't doubt it now because that was definitely the sound of the propellant going up in flames when the fire was reaching it. And we also got this other clip as well right here. Not this one. This is the same clip from earlier. But we also got this picture here, which looks to be a little bit up close. And we also got this picture of damage to a nearby building showing that whatever hit, it was kind of large, or at least the secondary explosions from the plant were fairly large. But this looks like that hallway, Matthew, at the beginning of the Chernobyl miniseries, where that guy was running down the hall and he looked outside and he said, "That's graphite on the ground. There is no graphite on the ground." It looks just like that hallway. Oh,
it's
man.
Kami hallway number 59.
Man, but let's listen to this guy here who just realized that he is going to be soon unemployed.
Офигеть.
Охуеть, да нахуй вы чё гоните?
Man, he is upset. He's mad.
Man, he's about to bust a blood vessel. He said, man, his wife said, "Honey, come look." And he said, "What? Hopefully it's about my shift." Oh, it's just like, bro, he just realized that he's not going to be called in for work tomorrow, and he's not getting paid at all. But moving on out of that, wonderful thing to see that they did hit this factory. We believe that that's going to be heavily reducing Russia's capability of firing Iskander missiles at Ukraine, which are commonly used against Ukraine at this point, because the Russian Federation is largely producing missiles on demand at this point, almost on a precision schedule, because from what we know, a lot of the missiles that the Russian Federation had in storage have been used, and at this point, Russian ballistic missile stocks are incredibly low, including the Iskander. This means that this factory, when it produces an Iskander, is basically sending them directly to a missile regiment somewhere in the Russian Federation that then drives somewhat close to Ukraine and then fires it off at the Ukrainians. We have been able to confirm that through proof of the plating of these missiles after they explode in Ukraine, because a lot of the plating is actually showing that a lot of these missiles are being produced literally within days or sometimes weeks of the actual missile being fired at Ukraine. So this may actually reduce Russia's ability to fire Iskanders at the state of Ukraine for a significant period of time, especially if a vital part of the assembly hall or the manufactory has been destroyed in the process. We also were able to see as well that within the area of Neftegorsk, which is within the Samara Oblast, a oil storage facility was also hit and caught on fire.
Я хочу домой.
This was one of several too, like, wasn't it? Like, this was like one of many that they actually hit all at the same time.
Oh yes, one of many.
Как небо нахуй. Да я вижу. А и вживую неплохо так светится.
There goes the Ukrainian SBU with a load of drones. They're gonna go drop them off near Saratov in a minute. Man, like the driver in this truck is like, "Man, these Russians don't even know that the rooftop is filled with 30 FPVs."
Oh, delivering a little cake.
Man, you got a bakery back there. Look at all that cake, and then the door, like the rooftop, I was like, "Oh, it's like, oh, that's not cake." But moving on down into the area of Rostov-on-Don, while Belgrade is going through an ongoing blackout still, which is still affecting pretty much the entirety of the city. As you can see here, the only lights in the streets are from the car headlights. We have also been able to confirm that the Ukrainians are wanting to include Rostov-on-Don in this. So apparently Zelensky said, "If Belgrade," enough times that Dmitriev grew another chin, and he said, "Mr. President, why don't we bomb Rostov-on-Don?" And Zelensky said, "Great idea, bomb the shit out of them." And so now we're hearing that they're also hitting the power plant at Rostov-on-Don, which provides electricity to the Rostov-on-Don city area. Oh!
Oh!
Not a good day, not a good day for the Russians. Ooh. And we also got to see down in Krasnodar, folks, some other interesting news. We were able to see that some fires have started to break out in Krasnodar, and we've also been able to hear that apparently some of these were once again caused, folks, by, what do you think it was, Mandy? Do you think it was a Ukrainian drone, a Ukrainian missile, or do you think it was Russian air defense that did this?
I have a feeling because you set it up like that, I have a feeling it's Russian air defense.
It was absolutely Russian air defense. The missiles failed again. Some Ukrainian, some hits actually were Ukrainian. Others were actually caused by more air defense missiles that failed, from what we've heard.
Oh, oh my god. They're dumbfounded.
They're flabbergasted. Man, I'm not gonna lie, dude. These guys dress up exactly like scabs from Escape from Tarkov. Like, no joke, dude. Like, they could put on a little vest and carry around a shotgun, and they look just like him. The only reason I'm saying that. The only reason I'm saying that, folks, is because I've been exposed to Tarkov again recently, and I'm like, damn, these. Let me go pull that up really quickly, man. Let me go. Like, I mean, you gotta see it. Like, let's see it. Tarkov.
Also, by the way, why'd they take away the last part of the name of the place? They said Krasnodar. Why don't they say Krasnodar Cry? Like, they took away the cry part while the Russians were actually crying.
Man, because the Russians have broken mentally so badly, they just can't even cry anymore. It's over for them. But man, don't these guys right here, like, look at them? Don't these guys look like this, which is a scab from Tarkov?
Yeah, they kind of do a little bit right there. They kind of do.
Yeah, they kind of do. Or they kind of look like, you know, this little dude right here, or this dude right here. You know, it's just without the gun and without the little, like, ammo carrying rigs and vests and stuff. But they're pretty close looking to a scab, you know? But anyway, so let's get back to the clip of watching them observe the destruction. I just love the chaos of the street, like the car alarm going off in the background, along with the house alarm. Everyone just talking. The person behind the camera who kind of sounds like a gremlin. You know, it's like it's all a great combination. Truly a Russian experience.
Also, by the way, I don't really know what is up with the Russian air defense that it keeps malfunctioning like this, because this is happening on a very routine basis. Like, I think most of the damage we've seen in recent attacks has been the Russian air defense firing their own interceptors or their own people. I'm not sure if Ukraine has somehow found a way to misdirect the air defense fire into the ground, possibly, or maybe the Russian air defense simply is not able to keep up with the new drone technology that Ukraine's using. Something, though, is going terribly wrong, and this is some of Russia's best air defense that's messing up.
Yeah, I would have to agree. It really is something interesting, and I think I don't mean to be, you know, a little bit too upfront with this, but I just think it's that Russian missiles suck a lot, and that's what's making them fail. I think it's something to do with their solid propellant or their motors that are failing, and that's what's leading them to have these sorts of issues. Maybe. I might be wrong, but that's what I'm thinking, because this is starting to happen a lot everywhere, even in Iran and Venezuela. We heard that similar such incidents had happened, so I think it might just be that Russian air defense missiles are terribly made with no quality control. But moving on out of that, it is time for us to finally get on into Ukraine, because we have a lot of news that came out of Ukraine today, and good news to say the least. Getting us on into our first bit of news in Ukraine, we were able to see that the Ukrainians have now moved on to creating War Thunder, but it's real life. The Ukrainians have started a new training course. I have to describe this here really quickly because this won't make any sense if I don't explain what this actually is, because it looks very close to real life. But the Ukrainians have created a unmanned ground vehicle simulator, and it allows for you to be able to customize the unmanned ground vehicle to whatever sort of a vehicle you will actually use in real life, and then be able to train on it in a realistic environment on this game. So it is basically just a war simulator, which is basically a video game, and the Ukrainians are actually using this to be able to train new unmanned ground vehicle operators on how to operate the unmanned ground vehicle. It actually is pretty neat, just to be entirely honest. And also, I believe, Matthew, that we can show this, at least in limited instances here. Like, for example, the unmanned ground vehicles from the third-person perspective from an FPV drone surveilling them. We can also see them here showing how it actually is operated. It literally is a video game. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to see that war is turning into, these days, a video game. It's a really interesting sort of a thing to see, because a lot of the skills that people use in video games now can easily be transferred to the battlefield. So crazy enough,
Yeah.
gamers do have a future in modern warfare.
Yeah, and also, by the way, like these training technologies here are highly important because the Russians don't get hardly any training at all. And if they can put this training into software, where that way it can largely be automated for the most part, that means they can simply sit the soldiers down at a computer, put them through their paces through these multiple different softwares here, and they can have a huge advantage over the Russians just because they're trained. And then the Ukrainians can follow that up with actual real world training on top of it. It's kind of like how they train commercial pilots to a certain degree, which is why they're so well trained, is because they go through simulator training and also real world training too, which is pretty impressive.
I'm not gonna lie to you, it's just crazy looking at this because I'm like, this literally looks like, any myriad of modern games. It literally is it's built out of modern gaming software. The simulator is, and it's insane to think, folks, that nowadays, like back in the day, folks, when we were kids growing up, which wasn't that long ago, people would come in and be like, war isn't a video game. You're not going to be able to play, you're not going to be able to fight a war on a gaming controller, and there's going to be, no respawns because you're not going to be, hundreds of miles away. You're going to be there in the fight. And nowadays, that's becoming less and less true because war is a video game for the larger extent, at least for a lot of roles these days, especially in the Ukrainian army. Guys just sit in a bunker somewhere and stay as hidden as possible, basically in no light, almost like a basement, and they sit there in front of a computer all day, and they just fly around drones, or they drive around a little ground vehicle, and they try and grease the Russians that way. And it's literally like a video game, at least for the Ukrainians.
So the conspiracy theory is true. The video games are designed to train young kids to be able to prepare for war.
I think, Matthew, it's the other way around. I think video games have now affected the battlefield to where war is starting to emulate a video game, really.
I don't know. Like I feel like, and I mean, there's not necessarily anything wrong with this because I mean, the kids were playing the games anyway. It's not like they were coerced into playing Call of Duty or something like that. But I feel like these games might have like some element of like real world application behind them, like maybe intentionally, possibly. I don't know that for a fact, but it seems like there's a strong correlation between the two because the drone technology and stuff, which used very similar controllers and systems like on a screen, that was way long time ago that they actually developed that, and way before the video games really took off. So there could be a correlation.
It could be possibly. I mean, it's definitely not out of the question seeing this sort of stuff right here. And what's even crazier, man, is that they show off that you can actually customize the vehicles depending on what type they're going to be using in real life. So to show you all some of the different variants here that they were actually showing off, this one is kind of like a heavier fire support or direct fire support vehicle. We rarely ever see these in Ukraine, but they use shoulder-mounted anti-tank weapons, basically as direct fire support, like an assault gun or a really small assault gun, basically. Then they showed off this one. I'll be entirely upfront with y'all. I don't even know what this one is actually supposed to be. I've never seen it before. Then they showed this one, which is the mine layer. This one's the one that has the little ramp, and all of these TM62 anti-tank mines are attached to each other by a string. And once the command is given to the vehicle, it then starts to drop these mines off, and they're able to lay it across the road. They also have the stretcher carrier, which is for medical evacuations of wounded Ukrainian soldiers. And they also have this one, which I believe is some sort of a EOD drone, which is supposed to be used for picking up mines, bombs, or undetonated explosives, and moving them to a separate location without a human having to do that in the process. But really crazy. I mean, you can actually use different variants of the drones in the game as well to learn about each one in their specific role. But moving on from that, we've also been able to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And a Bobcat!
Oh!
Hey!
They got one. Look at that. I'm so glad that they got one today. That's a good thing.
I gotta say, it's a great and wonderful thing, an incredible thing, and I have to say that the losses today are truly something else. According to Miss Disa, keeper of the records, troop losses average are staying below 1,000 a day. UAVs, cruise missiles, and vehicles are higher than in recent months, and there has been a notable drop in artillery. But today has still been good nonetheless. 970 Russian troops have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 6 APCs, 76 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 3 artillery pieces, 551 drones, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. It's been a pretty good day, and it's been a good day for one reason. Zelensky has claimed, and well, not really claimed, he has announced today, and we have been able to verify this, that the Ukrainian armed forces, I cannot sadly show the clip, folks. This actually is a clip from a copyrighted news network, if I'm not mistaken. But Zelensky did announce today in an interview that the Ukrainian armed forces have not just liberated 200 square kilometers of ground, which was our last report from 2 days ago. The Ukrainian armed forces have now liberated 300 square kilometers of ground, primarily on the southern front near Zaporizhia, and also a little bit of it around the Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka directions. It appears that this is showing that the Russians are once again on the back foot, and it seems that they're not really reorganizing their lines as quickly as we even expected. It looks like this is putting them on a permanent back foot at the moment, and the Ukrainians are taking advantage of their extremely slow communications and generally the lack of modern communications to be able to outmaneuver them, outshoot them, and then generally get them to fall back or completely wipe out units to be able to gain the ground that they need. And Matthew, what are people thinking about these sorts of developments right now? Are people thinking that the Russian lines are about to partially collapse, or that they're in the process of a full collapse, or something else in between? And what are you thinking about that?
Also, by the way, before I get to this poll right here, I got to mention something here. A source reached out to me that is very, very familiar with military operations, and they told me that they can confirm the picture that we saw earlier. By the way, I'm jumping to a little bit of a different topic here for a second. The picture showing the pie, lobster, and all the other stuff that the soldiers were eating in that picture. Apparently, that is a real photo. It's been confirmed by someone in the know, and they say that's not a normal Friday meal. So, despite what other people are claiming that that's normal for Friday deployments, apparently this lavish of a meal is apparently not normal, according to someone who's very much in the know. So very interesting. We have a group of folks claiming it's normal and a group of folks saying that it's totally not normal. So we'll have to leave that up to speculation. But anyways, getting into this poll, it says Ukraine now reports it has retaken 300 square kilometers of territory as Russian forces collapse. And what are your thoughts? 44% said Russian lines are partially going to collapse, while 37% said Russian lines will collapse, and 13% said they will not collapse. And I would say personally, they're already partially collapsing. That's already taking place right now. That's why the Ukrainians are taking 300 square kilometers, which is the largest gains since 2023, is because the Russians are not holding their defensive lines. So we're already at that stage. I think we could be looking at a full collapse, at least a regional collapse for the Russian lines. So I'm with the 38%. I think if Ukraine keeps it up and they keep hammering them hard enough with this communications outage, the Russians could have a catastrophic failure, considering that Ukraine's moving so fast. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm generally with the 44% as well. They're not going to completely collapse, but there is an ongoing partial collapse that has happened, and this will probably lead to the Ukrainians taking advantage of this probably for several more weeks. So they might end up taking, by the end of it all, maybe 700 kilometers of ground before the Russians are actually able to reform their lines and stop the Ukrainian advances. But it is going to be a sizable amount. I mean, 700 kilometers of ground retaken at any point in the war has basically been unheard of since the opening battles of the frontier back in 2022. So I would say that this is definitely going to be a historic moment, especially for the Ukrainians, and generally, as far as the strategic outlook is concerned, it's going to put the ball back in Ukraine's court at that level, and also on the tactical level, the Ukrainians will probably be able to gain superiority over the Russians for the remainder of the conflict on most fronts, except for areas where the Russians are literally just swarming and basically are overwhelming the Ukrainians using horde tactics. But moving on from that, we could also see on the Ukrainian front lines today, up in the area of the Sebronsky Forest, that the Ukrainians were making sure, apparently they're hunting Russians down in too spicy of a way for us to show. But down in Konstantinivka, we also were able to see some Russian soldiers getting hit down here by the 125th Heavy Mechanized Brigade. When you see them just finding the Russians, hitting them. It's quite easy, really. It's easy if you try. We see them now going around and finding themselves some more targets, like, for example, that one. And maybe this one as well. You know, a couple of mortars going in, never hurt anyone. You just have to make sure to, follow them up with a couple of slammings. And it appears that that was incredibly effective, all things considered, to say the least, without a doubt. No doubt about it, no questions. We also were able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces under the Fighting 93rd, the famous Fighting 93rd, which we have not heard from in a minute, were actually able to conduct some successful operations to retake a little bit of ground from the Russians today in Konstantinivka, part of that general Ukrainian counteroffensive that's taking a good amount of ground, at least at this point. And there they go, dashing through the snow. Infantry actions are very rare to see these days, but we can see them dealing with Russian fire, continuing to move through the forests. That one guy's got a actually everyone's got a pretty beefy suppressor. I mean, those things are huge. They're like soda cans. Dang, this guy's bringing a satchel of rifles.
How long do those suppressors last in war? Because according to what I've heard, suppressors are only good for like, what is it, like 10,000 rounds through them or something like that? So, I mean, these guys are probably putting 10,000 rounds down in just a couple of weeks, I'd imagine, or maybe a month, I would imagine, just guessing at it. So, I mean, how long do these suppressors even really last?
That's a great question, Matthew, and the answer is that the suppressors actually last as long as the rifles do, because interestingly enough, suppressors and rifles only can survive about 7 to 10,000 rounds each before they're completely worn out. So by about the time that the suppressor's worn out, the rifle barrel, or the rifling in the barrel of that rifle, is also worn out as well, and probably a lot of the mechanical components in the receiver are probably getting towards the end of their life as well. So actually, while the suppressors generally can't handle a great deal of fire, they still can handle enough to generally survive the life of the rifle.
Interesting. But with the actual gun itself, the rifle itself, you can just pretty much swap barrels, like for the most part. You can just swap barrels out. The receiver and the chamber and stuff like that, it takes damage. Obviously it does, but it seems like you can swap barrels out and you're okay. But the suppressors, though, obviously pretty expensive. They got to replace those out, and that's a pretty big expenditure just for one piece of the weapon.
That is true. That is, well, actually, wait, you're saying suppressors are expensive?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Oh, no, suppressors are only expensive here in America. Suppressors are actually fairly cheap from what I understand around most of the world, and really guns are as well. I mean, you can get an AK, like say if a military wanted to buy an AK-74, a lot like the Ukrainians use, or say an AR platform in large numbers, generally they can get that unit cost down to just a couple of $100s per unit. So like an FN M4 for the public would cost about $2,000, but an FN M4 for the U.S. Army would only cost about $650 to $700 because of the batch order that they put out. So, and also on top of that, the Ukrainians are using a great deal of weapons from former Soviet stock, so they're basically free. So generally, it's not that much. Let me make sure to pull this up. How much do, let's see, suppressors cost for the military? Let me see. I will just go with the U.S. number to see. Let's see here. So generally, suppressors can go, depending on the batch size, for as little as about $300 and all the way up to about $2,000, and it depends on the caliber and the batch. But generally, they can probably get them down to $350 because nobody ever buys such a small batch that the unit cost is around $2,000.
Yeah, that's bad. I mean, that's almost on par with what we're paying here in the U.S. For those suppressors almost. Because I mean, you can find suppressors here for like a 5.56 for around $450 to $500, like a mid-grade one. If you're looking for like a really like higher end one, it's going to go for like $600 to $1,000. So that's actually not much cheaper than I was thinking.
But I mean, it's still like 200, 300 though. Like if we're talking about on the low end, which is probably what the Ukrainians are getting, because they aren't made of money. $300 on the low end for one of these, surviving 7 to 10,000 rounds. I mean, that's a pretty good cost effectiveness right there.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess.
But we can see them moving on through the woods. We see this guy with a literal satchel of rifles. I don't know what he has the satchel of rifles for, but it's pretty cool, honestly. We see them getting inside of the automobile. That was apparently provided to them by the British because it had the left side steering configuration. We now see them hopping back out of the trunk and firing at the Russians in the distance. We also see, actually, sorry, that was a drone that they were firing at. You now see this guy whipping out the shoddy, I believe that was.
I've never really seen the Chameleon unit. That's kind of an interesting group.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never heard of a Chameleon group in the 93rd, but this is the first time we're hearing of them, and they look to be doing some good work. We now see satchel riflemen.
I don't know what the symbology is behind this, the Chameleon group. Is it because they try to blend in some extra? Oh, damn. That was a close one.
Yeah, damn. Like, that was crazy. Maybe that is. Maybe they say that they blend in and they're really good at, like, getting up on enemy positions and raiding them. So they're basically like chameleons because no one sees them until they're right up on top of them. Oh, and there went an outpost.
Oh. Yikes.
Oh, it's just some book bags and stuff, it's school supplies. I know we could see them tossing in some more grenades. The Ukrainians love grenades. Grenades are great. For clearing out bunkers, at least you just toss one in, and usually the problems solve themselves.
I wonder how a high vis would do on the battlefield. A high vis can get you in a lot of places, by the way, like social engineering and stuff like that. I wonder if they would avoid firing at you because you got high vis on.
Man, Matthew's gonna be out there on the battlefield in the high vis behind a whole bunch of guys in camo saying, "You see, you guys are the stupid guys. They're not gonna look for an ocean inspector." It's like,
The Russians could think it's the like a router technician showing up to fix the radio communications. I'm here to fix the radio. Could you please come into your behind the line situation? Yes, Bled, come right through. We need a radio so bad. Come on through. You never know with the Russians.
You wouldn't mind if I took a whole bunch of pictures of your setup to send back to management so that way they can know what y'all are working with. Of course! Please, take all the pictures you want. So it's like, oh, this is easy. It's like, this is what the CIA should have been doing all this time. But also we were able to see, apparently the 59th Assault Brigade was getting a little bit hairy there. It's always hard for me to say, folks, because whenever I watch these clips, which I only watch about the first 30 seconds of each of them, I always look at them like, they're not too bad, but apparently my eyes have just gotten used to the whole thing. Anyways, moving us on down in the Zaporizhia, we were able to confirm that the Ukrainians did shoot down an Su-34 today in the Zaporizhia front. Great news to hear. And we've also been able to hear that the Russians lost 3 Tor air defense systems in one day as the dramatic music ensues. This loss cost them a cumulative $75 million amongst the 3 Tor systems they lost. There was one of them. And here it goes. Haven't you ever...
Man. Oh, man. I guess you could say they tore it down. Look at that. Oh, my God. They tore it up.
Dang. That was a Tor M1 too. That was one of the earlier types.
Look at them. They're going in. Are they going in for a second? Oh, look, we got some stock footage again.
Oh, look, it's actually showing the firing process of the Tor, at least. This one was actually set up to fire, and it just didn't catch the drone coming from the right. It thought it was coming from the left, but it was actually coming from the right.
Poor bastard.
Poor bastard. Oh, and there goes a missile from a Tor. It's always neat how they kind of like catapult them out before the motor starts. It's neat. But, it's not neat enough. The Ukrainians are obliterating these things left and right. Also, this one's apparently Steamboat Willie. That oil filter hasn't been replaced in probably a couple of decades. But that's the end of the clip, and a wonderful thing to see you all together. And with that in mind, folks, it's now time for us to move on and into the next segment of our stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. Sadly, there was no speech from Zelensky today. Zelensky was busy with that interview that he was doing that we couldn't really show y'all because it was copyright, but still it was a very interesting one. He's been doing a lot of those lately. He actually did one on the Piers Morgan show, which I'd have to say was honestly nothing but absolute truth coming out of him, and I appreciate that. Respect it a great deal. But nevertheless, it is time for us to get on into our second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is it going to be a blast. We're going to be able to talk about literally anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, and whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not. And I've always got to say, folks, that it's a truly wonderful and incredible thing to know that so many people continue to choose this channel to be their primary source of news. We thank y'all a million because we've been able to see that there are still 14,000 people with us here tonight and about 120,000 people that have watched the show so far. It is actually crazy to see that that is how the shows are going every day these days, and I've just got to say that we're just absolutely blown away and just unbelievably appreciative of so many of y'all watching the show because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and let me see here really quickly because we haven't shown this on air for a minute. I know some people always ask, so I'll try and see if I can show this to y'all really quickly. We were, let me see here. We were number 70 in the top YouTube channels in America yesterday on YouTube. So really cool to see that. And I got to say a big thanks to y'all so much once again for considering this channel to be your primary source of news. And we're always honored to be able to get as much coverage as PBS NewsHour and also Call of Duty League, basically, which is basically every single person who's interested in the Call of Duty tournament. So it's kind of crazy.
Who else was below us?
Let's see here. PBS NewsHour, NASA spaceflight. And let's see. Oh yeah. By the way, folks, NASA's actually going to be restarting the moon missions here in March. It's very soon. So can't wait for that. That's going to be really neat to see. And let's see here. Iran International and Spaceflight Now. So mostly space channels.
Interesting. Who's like directly above us? I'm curious.
Who was directly above us? Why, let's see here. It was, let's see, a couple of channels, including Dr. Donut. Let's see, Matt Morris, the H3 podcast, Ludwig, UFC, Cali Plains. Let's see here. Associated Press.
I don't know what you keep scrolling past, so it's killing me.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just scrolling up the thing. But beyond that, what the hell is that? Bro, what is that?
I don't
Like,
know.
man, I don't even have sleep apnea. It's like, what the hell is that? I get a nice night's sleep every night.
Might have something protruding out of their neck for sleep apnea. I think they got bigger problems than sleep apnea.
Bro, is that like their vein bulging out their neck? I think they got some greater issues than sleep apnea. But then Markiplier was up at the top. By the way, he apparently made a great movie called Iron Lung. And then Steak was number 3. Oh, and Drewski was number 2. So, interesting to see. But with that, it is time for us, folks, to move on and into so everyone's making fun of the sleep apnea ad. I didn't even notice it, folks. I completely, blot out ads in my mind. I didn't even pay attention to it until Matthew was like, I don't know what the hell that is. And then I was like, what the hell is that? Was that the ad that was showing up the rest of the time?
Yeah, every single time you scrolled up, there was an ad slot. It was that same one. Every time you scrolled past it, like 5 or 6 times, I was like, "What the?" They kept shocking me every time you scrolled past it. I couldn't let it go. It kept compounding. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Bro, you're hearing that meme sound in your mind every time we pass it. You're like, "What the?" It's like, man, I didn't even realize it. But yeah, that was a very sus ad for sleep apnea. I feel like if you clicked on that link, it was not going to take you to anything about sleep apnea, straight up. But anyways, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, which is, well, not in the news. That whole segment distracted me so much, too, because I was like, what the hell? But anyways, it is time for us to get on into the questions. And we have, of course, a great deal of interesting questions. But before we get on into that, it does appear that a lot of people are still talking about the Russian Federation. And the fact that Zelensky, which I didn't include in our news today, but Zelensky did state that the Ukrainians should prepare for war for another 3 years. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so Zelensky has allegedly ordered preparations for the Ukrainian military to strongly oppose the Russians inside of Ukraine for at least 3 more years. And will Russia last that long? 48% said no, the Russian collapse is unavoidable, nobody can save them, while 33% said yes, China will keep them alive, and only 9% said Ukraine won't last that long. And, China has been keeping the Russians alive. That's been proven, actually, over the last month or so, that China is funneling money to Russia so that way they don't collapse. I'd had that theory for a very long time, and it has generally been proven for the most part. So, will China keep bankrolling the Russians indefinitely for years and years into the future? I highly doubt that, because eventually, the Chinese have to deal with their own domestic problems. They're currently having still major economic issues inside their country, and they're having major military purges as well. So I don't know if China can basically keep funding the Russian government, which is basically becoming a huge drag on China at this point. I'm not sure if that's possible. So I'm with the 48%. Eventually, the safeguards are going to run out and Russia is going to collapse. And 3 years might be too long because the oil industry inside of Russia is basically dead at this point and dying even further. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that the collapse of the Russian Federation is generally unavoidable. There really is no way that they can stop it at this point. No one can really help them because it would take way too much money, and China doesn't even have that money to help them. So they're pretty much up the creek without a paddle. It's going to end poorly for them, that's for sure. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that in mind, folks, it's time for us to get on into the question segment, and we are absolutely stoked to be able to get into it. And I also got to say that we're entirely appreciative of several hundred new people joining us tonight. Over the course of the stream, we've had 350 new subscribers, and we thank you all for subscribing and joining us. Y'all will be able to see here soon in the future when a whole bunch of people will find the channel, because it will happen. And everyone's going to be like, oh, wow, this is a great channel. You'll be like, I was here like 3 days before it happened. Like, I got here in time. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into the questions. Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping right back into our super chat questions, our next one goes to none other than Cliff H, who puts in a $22
Hey!
support, and thank you very much, Cliff, for that generous support. He said, "This is Cliff H. Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years in LSA."
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I mean, we will try and abide by that request. I don't know what the reason why we can't say that is, but I do thank you for the support, and we will try and make sure to avoid making that statement from here on in the future, Cliff H. And I also got to say that you have been here for years, Cliff H. You're an old guard and a channel legend, and we always greatly appreciate folks like you for sticking around for years. I got to say it's a wonderful and amazing thing, and it's an incredible thing to know that that people like you have been able to help this channel to keep running for years and years. It's a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And I just saw someone say China got enough FU money. No, they don't. They don't have FU money. They have that Bing chilling money, that money that really doesn't matter much outside of China. Nobody uses it as a reserve currency. Nobody really likes it. And also their economy's been floundering for the past 3 years straight. Because if you go and look at their GDP growth graph, for the past 3 years, it's basically flatlined. It still is. And if that is how your national economy is doing, that the GDP is not growing, you've got a lot of problems. Like, people say that America is having some problems. China's economy has literally stagnated for 3 straight years with a semi-capitalist system. That's basically unheard of in a capitalist system, that an economy flat out stagnates. Like if you look at China's GDP, it literally has just flattened out. It doesn't decrease, it doesn't increase, it just stays the same every year. And honestly, I don't know what it is, whether they've just cooked their books and they've cooked them so much they just physically can't cook them anymore, or if they're somehow trying to make sure that it doesn't drop. I don't know, but it looks unnatural, and China definitely doesn't have FU money, especially as far as how bad the Russians need money. They don't have that kind of money. But they never would. I mean, hell, we probably wouldn't even have that kind of money to help out Russia right now. I don't really think anyone could. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Arar983. And thank you very much, Arar, for that support. He said, breaking news. A certain big grocery store has sent a cease and desist to stop us from enjoying all the succulent $4.99 chickens. LSA.
What? They have? What, Matthew, did you not tell me about this?
Sue me, I'm guilty.
Well, lock me up in the stocks. I mean,
I'm guilty of grabbing one of those today, by the way. Actually, I grabbed one of those rotisseries myself down there at the store. That's actually what I had. I'm sustaining myself off that $4.99 chicken. You go, you know the whole routine. You get the chicken, you bring it home, you put it in the Tupperware after you get done processing the chicken, meaning you take it apart, and then you make sandwiches out of it with the mayonnaise. That's how you do it right there. That's a good hearty meal.
Wait a minute, you didn't just like reach into the bag and start ripping it apart by hand and just throwing it on a plate?
No, I put it into a Tupperware so that way I can store it.
Man, I worked like a caveman on that thing today, man. I opened up that bag and I went, chicken. And I just started ripping it apart with my hands and throwing it on the plate. And then I got to work. It was delicious, man. That chicken is so juicy every time. And that skin on the chicken too. It's cooked and seasoned to a perfection. I mean, it's an amazing culinary experience to be able to enjoy that chicken. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. And I've got to say, if a cease and desist has been given, I'm heartbroken. I don't know how they could do that to us. I guess it's because after we've talked about it so much that one news company made that article on how Gen Z kids are splurging on healthy juices for their gut in Costco chickens. And so I guess that would be the reason why. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a tremendous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Tom Exman, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Tom, as well. He said, do you think that the U.S. is arranging a weapons drop, maybe in collaboration with Mossad, to the Iranian protesters?
It's possible, but a little unlikely, because dropping weapons via the air is usually a bit of a questionable tactic, because it's never really guaranteed that they will fall into the right hands. They could fall into a whole bunch of other people's hands, like just random people who aren't associated with the cause who find them, or for that matter, ISIS, which does exist in Iran, or others, or the Iranian government. And so generally what we would do we wouldn't airdrop them in or like drop them in. We would actually just drive them in and basically hand them out of the back of a truck. Think of that that scene from Lord of War where like Nicolas Cage gets out of the airplane. He's like, guns, rockets, grenades, everything must go. That's basically what we would do, but it would be to specific people, not to everyone. It wouldn't just be everyone come up and get your fill of guns and ammo. It would be specific people that we would give them to, but we would just drive them in. This is a lot more surefire because we're generally in control of the truck. We can also bribe people along the way if we needed to, or, sometimes they might go to the length of threatening people along the way to keep their mouth shut. Only a few of them, though. If they did that to everyone, someone's going to snitch, and then that would be a problem. But then they drive them to some sort of a pre-secure location, drop them off there, probably a safe house in Iran, and then they'll drive out. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. But I can promise you that somewhere out there, America is bringing in weapons, whether it's airdropping them or driving them in. They're bringing in weapons to someone out there somewhere in Iran. So a big thanks to you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to Sika Games, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Sika, as well, for that support. They said, here is 20 for Andrew to join the passport bro scene. Trust me on this.
Oh, I thank you for the support, but I think I'm good. I think I'm okay. I'm pretty sure on that one. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Sergeant Lucius, or Lucius, excuse me. Sorry.
Sergeant Lucius.
Let me go back and get the actual spelling so I can get this right. Let's see here. Let's see. I was scrolling back up to get this because this is a bit of an unfortunate. Sergeant Lucius. Sorry about that. That was not intentional. I wrote it down as Luscious in the spreadsheet, which is not good. But he said, what are the chances the attack orders were given on or just after the 11th when DT and BN last met?
Could have been likely. It couldn't be out of the question. I mean, the orders could have been given at any time over the past few weeks, but it's decently likely it might have been given around that time, because that would have been about the time that the first force deployment started to happen in the Middle East, which would already suggest that we were getting ready to do something to them. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. This is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help it to keep on running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again for the incredible support, Sergeant Luscious.
Sergeant Luscious. Yeah, I'll tell you, that's something right there. It sounds like if you were called that, you might get into a brawl with somebody. If someone calls you that in real life, might be like, hey, what'd you call me now? Might be fighting words.
Man, bro, imagine your last name being Luscious, and you go into the army, and you're Sergeant Luscious. Bro, that's honestly, I'm not going to lie, folks, that kind of sounds like a stripper name, like Sergeant Luscious or something like that. It's like, bro, that was gold. That was gold right there, man. He said, this is from Sergeant Luscious. I was like, huh? I was like, who? Run that by me one more time? But anyways.
I'm sorry, Jill Sergeant.
I'm sorry, Sergeant. It's drill, Sergeant. But anyways, with that,
I'm trying my best, Jill Sergeant.
Man, what are you doing? My best, drill sergeant. Like, man, it's like, yeah, man. But anyways, oh man. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dan Brooks, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Dan, as well, for that support. He said Iran wants uranium, and the U.S. might be sending them some depleted uranium.
That's a good one. I like that one. That's a pretty smart one right there. And I got to thank you for the support, and I got to say that is a great one-liner. I got to say, 10 out of 10 on the effort there. And so a huge thanks to you once again for support, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Atreyu, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Atreyu, as well, for that generous support. They said it seems unlikely, but what if Iran just says, screw it, and then launches everything they can at one carrier, and then sinks it, and then surrenders?
It would be unlikely, because no one ever just goes out of their way to surrender, like, F them, and then they just give up right after that. It would be, they're going to be in it for the fight. Like, they're going to be in it to try and fight for their own survival, because surrender, who knows what that might bring. That might bring, Khomeini, on a spike or something like that, or on more so on a pike is probably the best way to explain. They're not going to make that sort of a decision. So I would say they're probably going to try and fight the war as strategically viably as possible, if that's a good way to word it, but they're not going to do something like, let's just try and sink one carrier and then immediately give up. But a huge thanks to you once again for support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Greenskin, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Greenskin, for that support. They said,
Uh,
hello, enforcers. And have you heard anything about the Dutch Special Merc Air Force joining Ukraine, Tomcats, and long live the Blue Spring Army and Slava Ukraine?
and I haven't actually heard anything about that myself, and I'm about to have to ask the famous question. Matthew, have you heard of that?
I have not heard about that specifically. Let's see here. Uh, yeah, I was reading it again to make sure I understood it properly the first time. The Dutch Special Air Force or Dutch Air Forces in general definitely have not done anything inside of Ukraine. They may have observers like other countries possibly there, but they have not joined in any combat operations. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I hope that does address that the best I can, and a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Eric Brown, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Eric, as well. He said, I honestly do feel bad for the citizenry of Russia. There's going to be a lot of children and elderly dying because of their government lying and not caring about them.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, a lot of them have already died already from the Iranian government's hand, so I would have to say it is a unfortunate thing. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Trison34, who puts in a 10. They said, looking forward to watching the USA take silver in hockey on the 22nd.
Oh, silver in hockey? You don't care about curling? Like, I'm just...
They don't care about gold? Silver and gold. Silver
Nobody-
and gold.
Nobody wants to buy my silver and gold. But anyways, on that though, I gotta say, it's gonna be interesting. I personally haven't been following the Winter Olympics a lot, but let's look at the Winter Olympics medal count. See who's doing good right now. Oh wow! Well, that's kind of expected. Norway is #1 right now.
Oh, wow. Honestly, I don't know anything about hockey. I'll be honest. Like, this is probably one of the least things that I probably would ever know about. I would know more about American football than I would about hockey, and that's not saying much.
Yeah, let's see, Siri. So, dang, dude, Europe is curb stomping everyone in the Winter Olympics right now. I mean, look at this. Out of the top 10, 8 of them are European nations. Austria, Sweden, Switzerland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, and Norway. I mean, Norway is probably the most expected one to be #1, because if you ever associated with anyone with living in winter conditions on a continuous basis, it would be the Norwegians. Or the Swedes. The Swedes are also there as well. What about Denmark and Finland? Dang, Finland's down there. And where's Denmark? Is Denmark on here at all? No. Denmark isn't even on here. You know, it's kind of a little bit. Let's look at the countries. Let's see if there's anyone who's shocking. Well, China being number 12 is actually a little bit interesting because the entirety of Manchuria is pretty damn cold in the winter, and for some reason they haven't really been able to produce any good winter athletes. The Canadians are besting them a little, so that's that's good to see. Japan's doing better than China, and Japan only has Hokkaido. Well, actually, they have most of Sendai and Hokkaido to train in for the Winter Olympics, if we want to be honest. So that's good to know. Austria is doing pretty good, and Switzerland is doing pretty good. But that's another thing that's also kind of weird is that Austria, Switzerland, and Italy, as well as France, and Germany even, are all Alpine countries with at least some part of the Alps within them. So you would think that they'd be doing exceptionally good as well. Also, Italy is as well. But they are also doing exceptionally good because they're all up in the top 10. Britain's number 15. The Czech Republic, 16. Kazakhstan is number 19 with 1 gold medal. That's it. Poland is number 21. They haven't gotten a single gold medal. And everyone down below them has not gotten a single gold medal. So that's a little bit interesting. I'll be honest with you. I just really don't follow a lot of anything sports related, even the Olympics. But it is interesting to see that the Norwegians are beating everyone. Good on them. But the United States is up there. We're a lot closer to Italy than we are in Norway at this point. I mean, Norway is just absolutely dominating right now. So great to see one of our allies succeeding. We love to see our allies succeed. Actually, it's really cool to see that the whole top 10 is basically U.S.-aligned allies. Isn't that great? The Western world together is dominating the top 10. It's a great, beautiful thing to see. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Jen Jones, who puts in a 10. He said, so what is the long game for Iran after the U.S. steps in?
The long game for Iran is to try and survive hopefully the point where either the U.S. president loses interest, which is likely, or the U.S. president is forced to lose interest because of a lack of public will in the United States. It's going to be one or the other, and that's what the Iranians are going to be trying to outlast. Which who knows how long that will last. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from a Grain of Salt official. This is not the phony, this is the official Grain of Salt. And they put in a 10. They said, thank you guys for all of your non-biased, extensive wartime and weapon-based news and knowledge. And you guys rock. And I've been hooked on your channel since I came across y'all. And God bless and LSA.
Hey, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And I gotta say, thank you so much for enjoying our channel for a while. We love to know that people really do get a big hoot out of the thing and really find it to be worth its salt. And we're glad to know that you're one of those folks. And I gotta thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Alan G. Dash. And thank you very much, Alan, for that $10 supporter. He said, great job, Enforcers. No politics and only common sense. And take one from the chat and enjoy some more of that Costco chicken.
Hey, we love Costco chicken. And I thank you so much for enjoying our politically neutral, analysis-focused content. It's rare here on the internet to see something like that. It's rare. And you really don't see it. You really don't see it. But we're always happy to know that a lot of people really do enjoy it and appreciate it. And I got to say that I thank you greatly for being one of those folks as well. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we're on to the next one.
And let's get that one from the chat. This one's going to go to Kim, who said, with such a large force moved off the shores of Iran, how much do you estimate it costs the military to accomplish this setup? Oh boy, we're talking about money. We're talking about big money because y'all know how much it costs to keep the troops around Venezuela. I think what was it, Enforcer? Remind me of the actual cost of that because I don't want to misquote it. Do you remember the exact number? Yeah, how much was it a day though? Like the day number is what we usually go with.
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I just remember that the whole force deployment side of things cost, I believe it was like in excess of 10 billion or something. It was way up in the billions though.
Let's see here. So it says U.S. military operations around Venezuela generally cost about $3 billion as of February 2026. So $3 billion over the course of the couple of months they were there. But then again, though, that was a much smaller deployment around Venezuela than what we're seeing right now in the Middle East. I mean, we have a combined massive Air Force presence. We're not even really sure how much Air Force presence is actually there. We only know about the stuff we've seen on satellite. 30% of the Navy's there. That's obviously massive, way bigger than Venezuela's situation. I mean, we got everything. Also, force deployments too. Air defense deployments. I mean, this is a lot larger. We've probably already spent probably double or triple that amount already, I'd imagine.
I would believe so. It has to be exorbitantly expensive, but that's what the armed forces are. The armed forces are a money pit, but it's a money pit with a good purpose. And so with that, that does address it the best I can. And I thank you once again for sponsoring our live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Redhead. And thank you very much for that support, by the way. They did not leave a comment, but we appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 5 from Bruce Lee, who said for the new window fund, and hopefully no major damages after it let loose and all that stuff that hit Matt's basement. Snow. And thankfully, the window actually stayed intact. So apparently it could handle it. It just was not very confidence-inspiring the way it sounded. The wind was so powerful, it was cracking the window to the point where it felt like the window was going to fall in, which I thought it was for a minute. That wind was crazy. It was like 60-mile-an-hour winds out here. So the wind stopped, the snow hit, and we still don't really have snow in the valley, but there's snow in the mountains now. So you can see them on the perimeter of the entire city, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we got a little bit of snow, but not really though. What I was expecting. But Enforcer, what say you?
The snow on the mountains looks sick, by the way, folks. It's the first time they've ever been fully covered in snow, and you look out there and it really feels like you're in winter now. It's cold, it's snowy looking, it's really cool. And also, luckily, Matthew's house did stand up to the whole test of deals that was coming around the winds. Mine did totally fine. I mean, there was no creaking or anything, but the wind is loud. You can actually hear it through the walls, like whistling around the building because it's blowing that strongly. And I gotta say, folks, I never thought that winds could ever be as strong as they are until we got out here, because in the south, winds were always broken by the trees. So like it would kind of be strong, but it never really would be like extremely strong. But out here, it is just unmitigated strength because there's basically no trees to break up the wind. So you're getting hit by the full force of the stuff. It's really something. But still, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you for the support and help the channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $5 support from Bruce Lee once again. And he said, for the intern fund, and when World War III pops off, you'll need that help. Consider this my application for full time. It can reach me in unofficial Discord, JK, but OC, LSA. Honestly, Bruce, we don't even have the budget to hire somebody. Like, honestly, we've talked about that before, about bringing somebody else in, not necessarily to take over like operating the streams or something, but simply to do some of the research work off the air. But ultimately, though, it's hard. Like, managing people is always difficult. Like, even if it's just one or two people, keeping people on task is, if you've ever managed people, which I'm sure you probably have at some point, it's always a little bit more complicated than it looks. Sometimes it's more of a burden than it is a help. But if it's an unpaid intern, I don't really like the idea of an unpaid intern. I never really cared for that. I never even took positions as an unpaid intern. Like, even when I was in college or anything like that, I never did that. I have a general problem with that whole concept. It seems a bit strange to me, but sadly we just don't have the budget for it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I make nothing. Zero. Zilch. By the time I pay all my scientists, all the people in my research department and lab coats, it's a wash. Well, why do you do it then, baby Billy? Well, 'cause I'm selfless. And I want to heal as many people as the dear Lord lets me. But beyond that, the answer as to why we don't have anyone else working on the channel is because we don't actually make enough money to be able to actually hire other people. And that's actually a little bit of something that's kind of interesting, folks, because people always think that channels like this make, millions. It's nowhere close to that. So we make enough to be able to, live somewhat decently ourselves. And when I mean decently, it's not absolutely paycheck to paycheck. We're able to save just a little bit, but we don't make enough that we're able to build up a war chest and then start building up, an entire crew and a team behind us. Because we no joke, not trying to use the Baby Billy line, but I mean, after we actually do pay ourselves, there's really not a lot that's left at all to really throw around. I mean, even making the intro for the live stream way back in the day, I mean, that was months of savings that I've threw into that to be able to go and make that possible. It was a lot. And so we actually don't really have the ability to do that. And also on top of that, nowadays, I really don't like the idea of having like a whole bunch of unpaid interns because I know what the unpaid interns are about in most companies. And I don't really like it because it seems exploitative to me. It's like it's having people dedicate their time and their labor, but not paying them properly for it. And me personally, I don't really like that too much. But I do think,
but you get the opportunity. You get the opportunity, though.
Hey, the opportunity to grow. It's like bullshit. It's like it's the opportunity for your company to get free work. And I'm not really one for wanting people to do that myself. But I do thank you so much for the incredibly kind offer.
Also, by the way, like we have taken on so many hats. Like, for example, even with the merch store, like the web design, the distribution, the merch design itself, the shipping of the stuff, literally everything. Like, we handled every single one of those things. That most companies would actually hire somebody to do each one of those individual things. Luckily, though, because our interests have been so diversified when we were younger, like I did web design before I ever did this channel. Like, I was actually doing that. I actually did real web design for businesses. And on top of that, also, I've generally the basics about coding, generally, not a whole bunch. I don't know like proper languages and stuff like that, but know some of that. I've also done a little bit of graphic design. I've done a little bit of everything from time to time, even cinematography. Like when it came to like filming the gun reviews and stuff like that, I generally have some hobbyist experience in most of that stuff. And the Enforcer has his own experience as well. Like, for example, we know how to play musical instruments as well, so he knew generally what to do with the whole orchestra stuff. So we've taken on a lot of different hats on this channel. So I like to do it that way better. Honestly, I feel like you have more control of it that way, and it feels more authentic when you don't have like 1,000 different people trying to add like their own little spin to it, and then it gets just muddled. Like, you don't really have a direction at that point. It's just a whole bunch of like, commercialized muddle. I don't really like it when it gets like that.
Yeah, I don't really like that much either. And also, it lets y'all have a lot more of our personal flair. Like, a lot of y'all would know now, like with our intro and how it works, I'm not really one for modern music. And then the intro really reflects that a lot. And then also how the show runs. It really is more so less about what we were able to get people to write for us on a teleprompter before the show. It's more so about what we actually are able to know and say. I mean, like everything about this channel, it's basically our entire lives and all of our efforts for the past 4 years have been poured into this thing completely. So it is a complete representation of what Matthew and me are, like how the show is presented, how regular the show runs, how much information and research is done beforehand, how the thumbnails and titles look, everything about it. I mean, the intro to the streams, everything. I mean, it's all done by us, and I really find a lot of pride in that myself, because when you look at it all, it's like this is just our creation. That's it. There was really no one else that was like heavily involved in making it happen over these years, rather than just the two of us. I actually, as a matter of fact, there was actually quite literally basically nobody, at least on the day-to-day. Like with the orchestra, there was, our great composer Marcos Barilari, and also Budapest Scoring, that did that primarily outside of me, because I don't have the ability to be a 56-man orchestra, and I also don't have the ability to be an actual trained composer. So outside of those sorts of efforts and endeavors, it's literally just been the two of us that run the daily operations for 4 straight years. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and the offer, though. It is incredibly nice of you, and we do thank you for your kindness. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to WF2U, who puts in a 5 and said the Iron Dome system was successful in final operational trials during the 12-day war. Production units have been issued to the IDF since December.
I would still say it's probably in limited number, because when people say, "Oh, look, something's going into service," usually it's like 5 years from now that it'll be in complete service. Right now it's at fairly limited numbers, and I just don't think there's enough of them to really be ready for what's coming around the corner again right now. I might be wrong, and I'll be pretty interested to see if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Israelis were able to pump these things out, because basically everyone else in the world is saying that the nearest available date that they'll start seeing enough units even in the field to say that they're actually represented decently amongst combat units is going to be by 2028. So I would doubt that the Israelis have enough of them to be able to cover an entire front or deal with hundreds of drones at a time. But I do thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep running, and that is true information. I had to look into that a little bit earlier and see if it was in the middle of running the show, but that does appear to be true information about it being introduced in December, but I still think it's going to be in fairly small and limited numbers, most likely. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to MCHLOVMTL, who puts in a $13 support, and thank you very much for that support as well. They said, considering the countries that are members of the so-called Board of Peace and the U.S. president's way to talk about European countries, do you think there is a timeline where the U.S. attacks and invades Europe?
No, because I think that's going to, I'll be entirely honest, that would meet so much pushback in the United States. It doesn't even matter by the public. That would be by the Congress and also a whole bunch of other people who are fairly successful in business. I don't think the president would be the president that much longer if that was attempted, to be flat out, because there is so much business-related ventures that the U.S. has with Europe that it would basically be impossible to do something like that in reality without just having the country basically revolt against the president. And then that's not for people who, who are about to say otherwise in the chat, who, just work a 9-to-5 job and don't have to look at the bigger picture all the time. Because, if you look at the bigger picture, that's just the fact of life. If you don't look at the bigger picture, you can say screw Europe. But if you look at the bigger picture, there's really no way to say screw Europe and make that work. It would screw us over. So I don't really think there would be. And also, I think that if that sort of course of action was ever seriously threatened again, like it was with Greenland, I think we're probably going to see that this president's party even is not even going to get really that much of a shot at a election after this one is over. I think they're probably just going to end up losing significantly, which, I mean, even right now, just being honest, right now with how things have been going, I'm not even speaking domestically, more so I would say on foreign policy, with how things have been going so far, it looks like they're already lining up to basically lose the midterms pretty badly. And that kind of tells you enough that this current foreign policy trend is already wildly unpopular. If it went any further down this rabbit hole, it's going to basically lead to almost nearly an open revolt by the other branches of the U.S. government against the guy. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ori Dekel, who put in a 5. They said, here in Israel, the shelters are ready.
Oh, well, I hope so. And a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And before we move on to the next one, I see a lot of people saying, well, to make some more money, why don't y'all run some ads and maybe get some sponsorships? We don't want to, because me personally, it's not all about the money. Like, I'm like, we're going to be here doing this for a long time. That I can tell y'all, because this channel has lived far longer than anyone ever expected it to. Everyone who was telling me at the beginning of me doing this, they were like, this is going to last 6 months. This isn't a job. And now we're both here 4 years later, and we're still doing this, and it's actually becoming even more popular 4 years in than it was 4 years ago. So we're going to be doing this for an incredibly long time, I'm sure. And I don't want the channel to be over monetized, because nowadays, with how a lot of companies run, companies and businesses run with the idea of absolutely ripping off their customers or their fans or their viewers as much as they can. They run every single sponsorship. You buy like Amazon Prime Video, and while you're watching Prime Video, they have ads running in the middle of you paying for a subscription to watch a show, and then they're running ads anyways, and then they say if you really want to skip these ads, then you have to get like Prime Plus or something to be able to skip the ads and even pay more. And I don't really like that stuff these days, because it's not always about greed, and it's not always about trying to get the most money. I mean, we make a decent living as it is, and if we ever become multimillionaires, it's because the channel has become a dominant news source in America, and it's a pretty decent one right now. But I'm never going to go out of my way to just, and I think Matthew would definitely agree with me here, to go out of our way to just try and absolutely rake in dough off of this thing.
Oh yeah.
At least me personally, that's how I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not. I don't want to do that. I personally despise, like, for example, when you hear about YouTube channels like, oh, I'm going to start, like, for example, let's just use us as the example. We're going to start Enforcer Chocolate, Enforcer Bank, Enforcer Car Lot. It's like, we're going to also start
Enforcer Crypto.
Enforcer, yeah, Enforcer Crypto. It's like, isn't that like tacky? It's like, of course you could do that, and you'll probably make money from it, but it's all like short-term cash grabs. It's not like you're actually trying to build something genuine. Because if you were, you wouldn't use your YouTube name to do it. You would start an entirely new brand separate from that, and you'd run with it on a different front. So it's all like quick cash grab stuff. It looks really tacky. And also, by the way, you don't become a journalist, or you don't become, even if you don't want to call us a journalist, but I could see an argument, fair enough. Let's say you just want to call us a reporter. You don't become a reporter or a journalist to become wealthy. Like, it's just simply not an industry like that. You're not going to get rich doing journalism. That's just simply not the way it works. It's something that you go into if you enjoy it, you find it sort of some satisfaction out of it, but you don't go, like, you're not going to become a millionaire. Let's just put it that way. But I'm fine with that personally. We enjoy doing it, and whatever we make from it, if we end up, making decent money off of it, great. If we don't, and it's just enough to get by, then that's great too. But I enjoy doing this a lot more than what I was previously doing, and that's why I went with this.
And also, something that I've always said, and this is something I don't really say a lot these days, but years ago I was saying it all the time, and I would still preach this, is that reputation is a currency of its own. It's one that you never pays out, and you can't really buy a meal or keep the lights on with reputation. But I like to keep the reputation going for this channel, that we provide a high-quality news service that is well-researched, very thorough, has no paywalls, and at the same time, we're not absolutely trying to run people's pockets for every dollar that they have in every single way. And I think that a lot of people appreciate that we run a high quality, basically premier news service on YouTube, basically for free. I mean, nobody even has to throw in a super chat if they didn't want to. Like, every single viewer, every single night is never under the obligation to throw in a super chat. The ones who do go out of their way to make the channel possible for everyone else, but no single individual person ever has to go out of their way to try and make to pay to watch this channel. And I don't believe that news, especially quality news that is grounded in reality and is not trying to push some form of propaganda, should ever really be hidden behind a paywall. I think that people should, I think I will be entirely honest with you, I have a very strong moral conviction, and I have had this ever since the beginning of the channel, that a well-minded and well-intentioned republic has to be a well-informed republic, and therefore news of high quality has to be readily available and easy to access, basically for free, for the public, so that way they can understand what's going on in the world, where the United States stands in that, and where we're going to be going as a result of it.
Yeah, I would say so. Indeed. The only thing that we've ever done that I could consider monetizing something, we have run sponsorships before in our short war videos. We've only had one. Actually, I take that back. We've actually had 2 or 3 sponsors over the course of the 4 years running the channel. We generally don't do those anymore for the most part. We're still kind of halfway open to them if it's a genuinely decent partnership. But we're not in the business of just grabbing a company and just putting their name out there or something unless we actually think it's a good company, which is a lot different than other YouTubers. Most YouTubers, if they get a sponsorship offer, the way it works behind the scenes is it's simply a matter of money. How much money is the sponsor willing to pay in order to shout them out? But we've always taken the approach every single time we've negotiated with a sponsor is we want to make sure that the company is actually something that we feel comfortable putting our name behind. Like anytime we do something like that, because there's been a lot of scandals on YouTube where people blindly go with companies and get sponsored on YouTube channels, and it turns into a massive scandal because they didn't do enough research into it, and we've wanted to avoid that like the plague. We didn't want anything like that to happen, and that's why we've been very careful about it. So the only way we monetize it outside of super chats, and we run obviously the ads on the short war videos from YouTube, is we do merch, but we haven't done that for like a year. The last time we did merch was in 2024, so we want to bring that back this year if we can find the time to do it. We want to bring that back, but that's pretty much the only thing we do extra.
Yeah, that really is. And like that was a headache the last way we did that, folks. That's why we haven't done it for a minute, because we're trying to restructure that whole department, which is just still the both of us. We're trying to restructure that whole thing to make it a lot easier to do, because the last time we did it, folks, it actually was about to swamp us to the point that the show was about to come grinding to a stop, because there was so much we were having to do in the background to make all of that happen on every end. I mean, like, it was everything: packing, shipping, distributing, the paperwork involved with that for the government. It was unbelievable. It was, like, we were both like, damn, this is a lot. I was about to get carpal tunnel syndrome from signing like 550 flags over the course of, I think it was like 2.5 days. It was hell. It
My
was
feet were
hell.
getting tired. I was
Dude,
having to stand over. I was having to stand over the enforcer the whole time, like a supervisor, and say, "Sign it, sign it, sign it." And he's sitting there going, "I don't wanna, I don't want." I said, "Sign it, dang it!" So, my feet were tired.
my hand was hurting so badly, folks, that by the time I was getting back on air, because I'm left-handed, so I sign with my left hand. My left hand, when I was trying to work the keyboard, was missing keys everywhere during those days, because my hand and wrist was so tired from doing all that signing. Because those gold Sharpies, like, you don't really think about it when you're just signing or working with them for a couple of minutes, but if you're working with them for like 8 to 10 hours a day, those gold Sharpies require a whole lot of force to, like, push down onto the flag to sign. And it doesn't seem like a lot until you're doing that for hours, and then it takes a tremendous amount of effort to do that. And it's like, damn, it's like, this is tough. And then on top of that, we would have to get up and we'd have to lay the flags out on the floor, by the dozens, and let the signatures dry so that way they didn't smear. And then we would have to go and fold them, and then we'd have to pack them, and then we'd have to put the packing labels on each one of them and make sure that it was the right packing label for the right number of flags for the right location. And then we would have to
Man,
pack all those up, and then we put them into my car, and then I'd have to drive down to the post office and go throw those in a giant bin, and then hope that they made it out somewhere. And if they didn't, then we'd have to send another one to whoever lost one. And it was just like, just getting
every
the flags out, it
single
was tough.
piece of merch that we sold from our new merch store that we did ourselves was personally handled by both me and Andrew at some point. Andrew was signing them, and I was packing them and putting them in the actual poly mailer and putting the label on it. On each and every single one of those, by the way. And there was a lot. There was a hell of a lot. So it was really insane. We did every single bit of that without having to hire external people at all. Like, that was honestly, like, that was too much, and that's generally why we haven't run a merch run since then, is because it was a lot to manage. So we're looking for a merch partner. We've got one in the works, by the way, but we still got to do a lot of work to actually make that finalized, and I haven't really gotten on it, to be perfectly honest, because we've been so busy with the news.
Yeah, and the news takes up a lot of time in its own right. And, like, when we think about it, I've been telling Matthew behind the scenes lately, I'm like, damn, dude, like, this takes up a lot of time. Like, every day running the stream itself is 3.5 hours to 4 hours, and then I have about 2.5 hours to 3 hours of prep before that. So every single day, 6 days a week, it's about a 7 hour work week, for 7 hour work day for me every day, 6 days a week. Then on every other day, because we alternate days for short war videos, I'm sure a lot of y'all noticed. if there is a short war video to make, then I have spent another 2 hours or 2.5 hours those days making that video and then putting it out. So some days, like for me, I'll be working like 9 hours a day sometimes to make the video and do the stream and everything. And when we put it like that and we're doing that 6 days a week, and then even on Mondays we're still doing stuff as well, or if stuff is about to happen like Iran, we basically just have to sit at home all day and just wait for something to happen, which then takes up a whole bunch of time indirectly. There really isn't a lot of time to get around to doing other stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm like, honestly, like we really should get merch running. I've been telling Mandy, I'm like, we really need to get the merch back up and running because a lot of people do want more LSA flags. But at the same time, though, we're spending so much time just doing the bare basics, it's really hard to focus or really even do that for that matter because there's so little time left in a day, rather than like trying to get food, trying to take a shower, trying to sleep, trying to run some basic errands. Like we hardly even have time to get out hardly and do stuff most of the time, except for Mondays in the afternoons. But anyways, with that, we are I'm not trying to play the world's tiniest violin here. I'm just telling you all like the amount of time we have in a day, and it's not really a lot to do a merch store, but we are still going to try and get the thing up and running eventually. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here is going to go to none other than Stitchmaster, who put in a 10. They said, that's something I can get behind. Also, what do you think Australia's position will be when America starts bombing Iran?
I think Australia's position will probably be a neutral one because it doesn't really affect them all too much. And I also really don't know a lot about the Australian government's domestic political objectives, opinions, and morals. So I think they probably just remain neutral from what I know, but I might be mistaken on that. But a big thanks to you for support and for the channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from WF2U yet again. And they said the Iron Beam system final prototypes were operationally successful in the war and they've been issued. And also, by the way, I think I might have duplicated that one by accident. But thank you very much for that support, and we appreciate that. We also have a 5 from Lochiche, who said, LOL, if they break out the steak and the lobster, you're getting deployed.
Oh man, are you going to be landing on the beaches in Normandy, one or the other? But a big thanks to you so much for the support. Now with this channel to keep on running, folks like you make this thing possible, and generally from what I've always heard, that was always true. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are about to be moving on to the next one. And also, I saw someone apparently criticizing Matthew, and I gotta say, I don't know what it is.
What they say? What they say?
They said this. First, those Jews, as in the Israelis, are seconds away when Iran attacks, while America is far away. Matthew, get real. The red, white, and blue are driving you two to talk pro-American trash. Well, here's the thing, Paul. Here's the thing. When we talk about the United States of America, we're not talking about what the Israelis want. I'm sorry to tell you that. I'm sure that's much to your dismay. Is that I really don't care what the Israelis want at the end of the day. The U.S. isn't Israel's henchman. We generally represent our own interest, and if that's mutually beneficial to the Israelis, that's wonderful. That's great for them, and that's good to know that they're going to be helped out. But if it comes to us versus them in the Middle East, and who in the world am I going to pick the side of, I'm not an Israeli. So that already picks my fight. I'm going to be on the American side of that. So if the Israelis don't like something we're doing in the Middle East, or if there's a major imminent security threat to the United States, and by us dealing with it, that in turn helps out the Israelis a little bit, that's whatever. I mean, that's what it is. I don't really care all that much. And I think that's where a lot of people like you end up missing the boat, because I don't really know what people have, because it's like people are cutting off their own nose to spite their face on this thing, because the Iranians want to harm Americans and Israelis, but primarily, for my concern being an American, they want to harm people like me and you, all the Americans here watching this channel right now. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to basically screw ourselves over, because by helping ourselves, we might help out the Israelis. So I just heavily ask for some people to put away all of the hatred they have for Israel, for whatever reason they have, because some people hate Israel so much they would screw over the United States just to try and get at Israel for a minute, which in the end of it all ends up becoming un-American, because you're willing to screw over your own countrymen, because somewhere out there in the world, a country that you don't like might end up standing to benefit from the U.S. protecting our own interests and our own people. It makes no sense. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bach, who puts into 5. He said, thanks, Enforcers.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on and into the next one.
And our next one goes to Ascension Industries, who puts in a 5. They said, does flight radar show military aircraft? I have the silver plan, but I've seen flights that do not exist on the app. They show military aircraft, by the way. You can filter directly for it on the filters tab. So they track them, but not all military aircraft are transponding. That's the catch. But that's not exclusively unique to Flight Radar 24. Any ADS-B exchange that collects ADS-B data from aircraft, if they're not transponding from the aircraft, they're not going to pick it up. So if you don't see it on Flight Radar, the odds are you're probably not going to see it on other platforms, unless the only caveat is unless the other platform has a wider range of receivers for the ADS-B radio signals. But Enforcer, what say you?
And Matthew is absolutely correct on that. But from what we know, there really isn't any other website that has as many ADS transponders or receivers as Flight Radar 24. So Flight Radar 24 is generally one of the most reliable sorts of websites that we've seen for this deal. And so with that, I hope that is addressed to the best I can. And a big thanks to you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to none other than Chef Danny B. It is the official chef of the LSA, and he comes in with a $50 support. And thank you very much, Chef Danny, for that $50 support. He said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And do y'all think it's going to be boots on the ground in Iran? And also, I haven't heard much about Syria, LSA. And I would say, Danny, in my opinion, I don't think there's going to be boots on the ground in Iran. I don't think they're planning that. If they do, that would be a bit of a shock. Also, Syria, by the way, a prison collapsed in Syria, and 15,000 ISIS fighters got loose, and they're at large. So Syria is not going good. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, Syria is not going good at all, Chef Danny B. I hate to say that. Syria is an absolute disaster at the moment. It's just that there's so many big things going on right now. Syria's kind of gotten buried in our coverage, sadly. I got to say, folks, it's kind of crazy with how much news we cover these days. We're kind of ending up having to pick and choose which ones are big and which ones aren't. And Syria right now is kind of falling off the radar for us at the moment, but it's not going well, that I can say. But outside of that, though, I don't really think there's going to be boots on the ground in Iran. I think the U.S. government, at least currently, is under the concept that putting any soldiers on the ground in the Middle East is a terrible idea. So they're completely against that. You can generally thank the vice president for that one, because the vice president, we don't need a forever war in the Middle East. Is like, okay, so we're going to let the Iranians create a nuclear weapon and possibly kill millions of Americans in response because we just don't want to put some guys down. Like, I gotta say, I just wish people, like, I just wish that people in the government would think with their heads for a minute, because this was the same in the last administration. These choices aren't choices. The choices are made for us by the environment that we live in. Like, like I would say, yeah, we haven't had a fun time in the Middle East in the past 20 years, obviously, but that doesn't mean that, because boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan wasn't the greatest thing, that now we can go, oh, well, Iran is legitimately creating a nuclear weapon, but I don't really like the idea of putting a soldier on there. It's like, well, if we have to do that, we have to do that. We don't really have a choice in that. It's about what is going to protect Americans. So that's what it is. And also, I see someone say they're all spooked by the WMD light. Yeah, but the thing is, though, is that this is a totally different situation. I know what you mean, Silence. Like, that's a huge thing in people's minds, but they don't even get the nuance of it. And that's what's ridiculous to me. It's like, these people were elected as the president and the vice president. They don't even get the nuance and the difference between the two, and Biden didn't either. It's like, how did they not get this? Because with Iraq, there was really no proof that they were creating a nuclear weapon, and Saddam would go to the UN, and he would literally just sit up there and scream about how he doesn't have nuclear weapons, and he's being framed, and they're going to steamroll him for nothing because he's not doing any of that. And then we went in, and they really weren't doing any of that. On the other hand, though, the Iranians are literally openly saying, we are enriching uranium to create a nuclear weapon to target or threaten Israel and the United States with nuclear destruction. And they quote, it's for their own protection, and nobody's going to stop us. Because with Iraq, if we went to them back in the day and we said, hey, y'all need to stop making nuclear weapons, their answer was, we're not even making nuclear weapons. Iran's answer is, we are making them and you're not stopping us. Get lost. That's their answer. And that's been their answer at Geneva and Muscat just within the last 3 weeks. They've been saying that for years now. That's why the JCPOA was made way back in the Obama administration, was because they were even saying that back then, we're going to start working towards a nuclear weapon. And Obama went, oh, well, maybe we can just talk to them and they'll agree to a deal to where they won't make one. And then they agreed to a deal where they wouldn't make one, and then they were still trying to work on that in the background, because these nuclear facilities that are there right now did not pop up post JCPOA. They were already around during the JCPOA. So, that's kind of the thing about it. It's like, sure, it's like everybody thinks about the weapons of mass destruction myth that existed around Iraq. But unlike Iraq, I mean, there's literally endless proof that the Iranians are making one, not only from satellite photography, but from their very own words and statements. And also, if they weren't wanting to create a nuclear weapon, why wouldn't they just agree to limit their uranium enrichment to where they're not enriching weapons-grade uranium? I mean, that would be an easy ask and a guarantee from the Iranians if they weren't trying to create nuclear weaponry. Because if they weren't, and this whole thing was a lie, the U.S. could go, hey, could y'all stop enriching weapons-grade uranium? And Iran would say, yeah, sure, we can agree to that because we're not even enriching weapons-grade uranium anyways. We're not even trying to make a nuke. But every time we ask them that, they go, no, we're not going to stop our production of weapons-grade uranium because we need this for our nuclear program. And they say that endlessly. I mean, that's all the proof we need right there that this is a realistic sort of a deal right here. So I hope that answers that well. Silence, at least the best I can. But the thing is though, is that like the public's got to understand the nuance, and they've got to understand the nuance. But I mean, the truth of it is though, Silence, is that the vice president doesn't get the nuance. Like, just to be completely frank, because no matter how much that's been brought up, he just continues to stay very buried into his own ideals on what is right and wrong in the Middle East. And I'm like, it's like it's not up to your own just personal opinion, just and digging into it and being stubborn about it. This is a completely different situation than Iraq, and one that does pose a severe imminent threat. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, real quick, I ran a poll. Very simple question here. Do you support a U.S. war against Iran? 18% said no, and 82% said yes. The reason why I ran the poll is because I was kind of curious. I haven't really asked that question as direct as that, because today people are alleging, because people are running polls all over Twitter today, asking the general Twitter user population what they think about the situation. Did they support a U.S. war against Iran? And people were swearing up and down after most of the polls showed that people support a war against Iran. They were swearing that bots were flooding their polls and skewing the results, which, maybe so possibly because there are obviously bots, but I think that most people actually do support that war. The one argument that I keep seeing politicians make, which is the most stupid, low IQ argument you could possibly make, is most people will say, well, look, we have problems here at home in the United States, so we don't need any more foreign wars. It's like, well, since when do we have to split the two together or split the two separate? You got to deal with foreign policy. Just because we're having problems at home doesn't mean you abandon foreign policy. If you do that, you're going to create other problems. You can't just abandon one to save the other. It doesn't work like that. So it's like, why don't the politicians actually do the job that we pay them to do, which is to manage foreign policy and manage fixing our economy at the same time? You can do both. You don't have to pick and choose because we have a lot of federal resources out there, and we should put them to work instead of just letting them sit on their ass and do nothing. We should let them actually work instead of just lining their pockets, basically. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would completely agree with that. It's so stupid. Like this is a really goofy argument to me. People will be like, we should go to war with Iran, but we need to not do that until we get all the homeless veterans or the homeless people or the cost of groceries or the guns or the abortion or yada yada, and we fix that. And it's like, when has that ever stopped anyone from doing anything ever? Like, you didn't see the U.S. go in World War II. I have to say that the Empire of Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor, and we'd love to go to war, but right now there's a lot of unemployed people in America, so we're going to hold off on that and try and fix the whole unemployment thing first, then we'll go bomb them later. It's like, they didn't do that. And who the hell did that in the Cold War? Now, you didn't see John F. Kennedy going, the Soviets are putting IRBMs in Cuba, but right now we got this whole thing going on with Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. So we're going to hold off on dealing with the Soviets putting nukes in Cuba, and we're going to deal with the Civil Rights Movement first, and then go deal with Cuba later. Nobody does it that way because that would be stupid. I mean, there's always going to be something going on the home front that has to be dealt with domestically. So you could always use that as an excuse to not deal with foreign policy and basically screw ourselves over endlessly by just being completely inactive in that regard.
Yeah, it's an old tired playbook. It happens every time. Like once one party decides to do something, then the other one says, oh, those bastards are trying to take us to war. It's like, listen, it's like if your guy was in charge and he was doing something, like for example, the same situation, about to go to war with Iran because Iran's developing a nuke, then the other side would be trying to also say the exact same thing. They're trying to take us to war. It's like, look, It's like you're telling me that the representatives and senators that we have, they cannot split their focus between the foreign policy side of things and also fixing the economy. It's like, what has prevented you before from fixing the economy? You're telling me that if we get into a war with Iran, you can't fix the economy? It's like, come on, like, who's buying that bull crap?
I mean, who is really? I mean, like that. I don't even know who is. And another thing that's also pretty funny to me, folks, is that I remember back in the day, because I always love to tell y'all that political parties or political parties flip on a dime all the time, depending on who's in charge. They basically change their morals. Back when Biden was president and the U.S. was generally bombing the Houthis and also standing down against the Iranians, but we weren't even doing anything against them. I remember all the Republicans in this country going, "Oh my God, Biden's trying to start World War III. He wants America to look weak so that way we go to war," and all that stuff. And now that a Republican's president and we're about to go to war with Iran because of national security issues that are unavoidable, now it's the Democrats go, "Oh my God, Trump's trying to start World War III. He hates America and he wants everyone." It's like, sometimes we just have to do this stuff. Every president that's elected isn't trying to start World War III and get everyone killed because he hates America. It's like I'd like whether your personal opinions on the current president is good or not, and whether your personal opinions on the last president was good or not. Sometimes we just have to go do things. And Iran is something that we have to do. Like, unlike Venezuela, which is something that we could have completely avoided doing for the next 7 years, probably, Iran is an imminent threat that we've been talking about right now. We've said for years in this channel, from 2023 to now, so all the way through the end of the Biden administration and the Trump administration, we've been saying for endless periods of time that the Iranian situation is one that poses an imminent threat greater than Russia and China, because they are on the cusp of creating a nuclear weapon, meaning that the apex of the crisis with Iran is far closer than World War III with Russia or China attempting to invade Taiwan. And that's why we have to deal with them right now. And so this is an action that I'm 100% behind. And people on this channel were always behind that until it became a political thing now. And then some people, it's a small group of people, then want to go, "Oh, this is illegal," when it was not illegal to anyone for the past few years when we've been bringing this up. And then a lot of people want to now say a whole myriad of things just because it's become a political topic, and now the left is taking one side and the right's taking another. But the reality of it is that we're speaking honestly here. This is a lot like the Ukraine war. There's a straightforward answer. It poses a national security threat to the United States. Iran's an enemy, and that's that.
Yeah, and it's weird how it flips. Like, it flips from time to time. That there's been several presidents that made bad decisions when it comes to Iran, like all the time. Like, for example, just to give these examples, I'm not trying to add a political spin or tell you what I think personally about it, but for example, Obama had the whole situation where they sent the pallets of cash to Iran when they came up with that nuclear deal. That was a whole thing, and that turned into a really bad optic. People saw the cash in the plane that they were giving to the Ayatollahs, and they were like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And it did have a bad optic to it. But then also, the current president has talked about reviving the JCPOA, which is the same thing that led to the $400 million in cash being delivered to Iran back during Obama's presidency. He even talked about reviving it, and he's trying to negotiate right now. So it's like, back in the day, everybody bashed Obama for that. It just flip-flops. Like, it's all games. It's just a bunch of political games. If we could put those political games aside and actually look at things objectively as a country, we would have so much more effective foreign policy, like very much so, and a lot more of a cohesive society as well, because we'd be all on the same page. But because the politicians want to play games, they want to play all these political bullcrap they want to do, it ends up creating a whole bunch of division for absolutely no reason.
And the political games are absolutely stupid, because here's something that I remember, folks, that is hilarious when you think back on it. Back when the war in Ukraine started back in February of 2022, do y'all know the group who was the most vocal about there needs to be something done to support Ukraine? Y'all know who it was? It was the Republicans, because they weren't in charge. And at that moment, the Democrats hadn't done anything to help out Ukraine in that first month. The statement by Biden that first month was, "Let's give them another few months and see how it goes, and then we'll go from there." That's what he said, word for word. And the Republicans went, "What a weak bitch. He's going to let the Russians curb stomp us because our great and glorious leader Trump said in his last term that the Russians were a threat and that the Germans shouldn't build the Nord Stream," and all that shit. And then as soon as Biden did something to start helping out the Ukrainians. Then Trump comes out of the woodwork and goes, "This is not a good idea. This is a bad idea." And then the Republicans ended up split from that point. But most of them still supported Ukraine because you would see that all the congressional drawdowns were over a 66% unanimous majority, almost, well, not unanimous, but an overwhelming majority in both houses that the congressional drawdowns would be passed through. Then you would see that now the current president's in charge. And while in the prior term, it was all about we need to make sure that America represents itself properly and defends ourselves against our major threats, which was Russia, Iran, and China. Now you see this whole skewed perspective that makes no sense. So the president doesn't support the Ukrainians, although if you look at that party, the party that he's a part of, they were the most adamant and vocal in the first month to support Ukraine. And then as soon as he said something, half of them just jumped ship instantly because it's a politics game and they didn't want to piss off that guy's supporters. And then if you look at the current party, they would, if they were in charge right now, they would be making about the same moves against Iran as the current party would be, because they are hearing the same things from intelligence agencies that they're making a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's not stopped since Midnight Hammer. They're still working on that. And if we don't do something now, they're going to become a nuclear armed country. And this is going to be very bad for us in a million ways. And they would be doing the same thing. And then if the Democrats were doing this right now, the Republicans would be saying that the Democrats are trying to start World War III and get us all killed because they hate America and they want everyone dead. And right now, it's the opposite. The Democrats are saying that about the Republicans. If everyone would just step back and stop politicizing foreign policy, where there's literally just one answer to every equation, it's just, what do we do to protect the United States and its interest abroad? And right now that would be to militarily intervene against Iran for a million different reasons: crimes against humanity, nuclear weaponry, violation of non-proliferation treaties, national security risk, the funding of terrorist groups, the Iranian state being a terrorist state for that one thing. I mean, there is a million reasons for us to go and do something to Iran. There's a million reasons for us to continue to arm and supply Ukraine. There's a million reasons for us to face down the Chinese against invading Taiwan. But for some reason, all of these answers, which are very straightforward and we've been saying for years, somehow become politicized, and there's two different answers to the same problem that has only one solution to it. It's absolutely bizarre. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get back into some questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and our next super chat goes to none other than Chef Danny B once again. And thank you very much, Chef Danny, for the second support of the night. He said, Chef Danny again. And another thing nobody thought, there would be boots on the ground in Venezuela, and we all thought airstrikes. And do y'all think another Delta team would go in and take out the top leaders? And I don't think they're going to do the same. If you're talking about an exfiltration like they did with Maduro, that is very highly unlikely inside of Iran. If they try to do that, that's going to be a very bad idea. I know I said that as well about Venezuela. I turned out to be wrong in Venezuela. They ended up getting Maduro out, and they used brand new weaponry that we hadn't heard of. But even if they use that weaponry inside of Iran, Iran has a lot more air defense, and they use a lot of AA guns on the ground that do not rely on the Russian technology. So I don't know if they can pull that off inside of Iran. It might be too risky. It was pretty risky in Venezuela. We almost lost some people doing it there, and they weren't even as formidable as Iran. So I don't think so. I doubt it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think as far as threat assessments go, the threat assessment for special forces trying to land in Iran is going to be too high because there's really no way to drop them off by helicopters or really easily in any way for that matter. So I would have to say that in my opinion, I don't think we're going to see special forces this time. If anything, they're probably just going to conduct airstrikes on top officials and hope that that gets them, because trying to actually capture them is probably going to be too dangerous for the special forces operators, unlike Venezuela. Because if you look at Tehran is about 300 to 400 miles away from most points of egress that we have into Iran right now for the special forces. Venezuela, at least, was only about, I think it was like 30 miles or so, and then once we got over land, it was only 5 miles or so to Caracas, so it wasn't even that far. So that was a pretty easy one to pull off. But with Khamenei, however, it would be a lot more difficult because Tehran is just so far away from where our special forces could launch from and then get to that area. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Ryan Hill, who said Godspeed.
And thank you so much for the support, and Godspeed to you as well. And a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from that one dude who said, what will you guys do once there is peace on Earth? Unfortunately, I don't believe you will all have to ever worry about that, and keep up the good work. And that is true. There has never been peace on Earth, pretty much ever. That's not a good thing, by the way, but that's just the way it is. If you have people in so many different countries, you will simply never have one cohesive thing that you're working toward. Everybody's going to want to have their own little lane that they want to carve out because people have a little thing called ego. And you go around the world and you see it everywhere. People want to take their group of people and they want to basically take over the world. That's the ultimate goal of most countries on the planet. They want to be the top dog, and if that means they can dominate the whole planet, they will do it. That goes for every single country, honestly, even democracies, if they go unchecked. So I don't think we'll ever be out of business. And also, by the way, we don't have to have wars necessarily be in business. We can simply cover other news as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
As far as war, there's never really been a time on the face of this earth that there's never not been a war. At some point in every year somewhere, there's always a war. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to keep this thing running, and we wouldn't be able to cover the major developments that are going on right now for the larger part. So a huge thanks to you once again. And someone said, oh man, you got him. Drive your politics. Your wishful thinking is sad. Oh, I'm sure you're one of those people who are like, clearly the Democrats or the Republicans have all the answers. And if they do, here's my question. If they do...
bots.
Huh?
Feeding the bots.
I'm feeding them right now because that's low hanging fruit. It's good. It's good. If that is true that the Republicans or the Democrats have all the answers, how come they've never fixed everything? How come whenever they get elected, it's never a utopia? I mean, like under Biden, the economy was doing bad. Under Trump, the economy is doing bad. How in the world did neither of them have any of the answers? I mean, like if these people had everything, the country would fix itself like people pretend it does every time one of these new parties gets a majority in the Congress and also gets the presidency, and they never do. So I think the real answer is that neither of them have the answer. The people who think that that's the case are drinking the Kool-Aid. And the independents don't have the answers either, by the way, like at least the ones that they pick. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 5. And Bruce said, Skeletor voice. I'm not sure who that is, but he said, remember, don't point your phone as a Russian S-300 missile. It may just target you until they get it again. LSA.
Man, I gotta thank you, Mastery, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I gotta say, that is a pretty good point indeed, and I got to thank you massively once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I just saw someone say this. This is actually an interesting one. This is actually a very interesting point right here. Someone said, well, if the last president had sent helicopters and jets to Ukraine before Russia went in, it would have not happened. Russia would have backed down. You're right. You're absolutely right. If we had actually faced down the Russians in Ukraine before that war started, it would have been completely avoided. So let me ask you this. Why in the world is Trump doing that right now? Basically the same thing Biden did in Ukraine right before the war in Ukraine started. Why is he doing that with Taiwan? Because if y'all didn't hear, and I didn't include this in our news tonight, Trump is now saying that he's considering backing off of giving any weapons to Taiwan because the Chinese put in a phone call and said that they didn't like that. So basically what we're doing right now with Taiwan is the same weak approach that Biden did with Ukraine, which didn't end up well, and doing that with Taiwan is not going to end up well either, because China has made it clear they are going to invade Taiwan. Their entire military is built around, at this point, especially in the Eastern Theater Command, invading Taiwan. And our answer, it's not to try and meet the Chinese at the head and stop them right where they're at right now near Taiwan. It's basically to back off and show weakness again, just like Biden did in Ukraine, and basically leave the doors open for them. I mean, that's the crazy thing about it. Like, people don't see this stuff. It's like, yeah, what Biden did was insanely weak. I'd agree. Well, and we have to play the cards we're dealt with now, so no reason in moaning about it now. But there is something that we can change about that with what's going on with Taiwan. We can see that those same sorts of actions didn't work in Ukraine, so let's do something different with Taiwan. But instead, the current president is taking the very same approach. And you know what's going to happen, folks, is that Taiwan will get attacked, and they will get invaded, a lot like Ukraine was. And when that happens, the current president, just like the last one, will say, oh, who could have ever seen this one coming? I mean, who in the world would have ever thought that China was going to invade Taiwan? It wasn't like they've been talking about that their entire existence. You know, and it's just ridiculous watching this kind of stuff, because if you're sitting in our position where you don't take a partisan side, you could just see that and be like, that's you know, we need to learn from the lessons of the last administration and its failings, and then improve upon that now in foreign policy. And they don't. They literally do the same thing. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Matt Joff, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Matt, for that support. He said the new moon was a couple days back, and the night will only get brighter, to respectfully correct.
And I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I think I might have been a little bit incorrect on that. I tried to pull it up quickly, and the answer was that I believe it was a waxing crescent, but apparently that might have been incorrect. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Kyle Mills, and thank you very much, Kyle, as well, for that support. He said, what are the benefits to the American people of bombing Iran? And thank you for the news and LSA.
And can you reread that one again?
He said, what are the benefits to the American people of bombing Iran? And thank you for the news and LSA.
Seeing that Iran doesn't become a nuclear power that can threaten to kill those very same Americans with those nuclear weapons. That's generally the one main thing that's a benefit. The second thing is that we generally ensure that the Iranians will not be able to destabilize the U.S.'s hegemony of the Middle East largely and affect oil prices here in the United States of America, and also the price of the pump, and also the price for consumer goods as well, which would rise if the Iranians achieve their final objective, which is pushing us out of the Middle East. And also we would be able to see the United States would be able to ensure that the Iranian officials who had just conducted their crimes against humanity against the Iranian citizenry pay for their crimes, which generally ensures that the United States government remains on its moral level, at least for the public, that is, of making sure that good prevails in the world, which is always an important sign of hope to show to the people, even if it's happening in another country. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, we have a 31 Australian from Bob Anon. And thank you very much, Bob, for that very generous support all the way from Australia. And he said, hey, Enforcer, you better stop this political straight talk before you lose all your corporate sponsors. And thanks for keeping the focus on the news and not the money. You're doing a service to democracy. Love Ukraine, LT, LSA.
And I thank you so much for the support, Bobanon. And I mean, I better watch out. I mean, you know, the Schmaxim Prime or something like that's probably about to pull out of their sponsorship from us. And I thank you so much for enjoying our focus on news and not money. One of the few I think that does that these days, because I think there's a lot there. I think there's some other channels out there that actually run sponsorships in the middle of their live shows, which is like we did that once back in the day, but honestly, it was so tacky. The one time we did it, I swore up and down to Mandy. I was like, we're never doing that again. I hated doing that. I did not like it. But beyond that, though, I do thank you so much for enjoying our service to democracy, and we're always proud to do it. And so, humongous thanks to you once again for the support, Bob and On, and helping this channel to keep it running. And long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to DWRB, who puts in a 5, and he said, I'd be down for some Enforcer whiskey, LSA.
Enforcer whiskey? I was getting into alcohol? Heavens. I do thank you for the support. And
well, we don't even drink.
Yeah, we don't even drink. We don't even drink. We don't drink at all, as a matter of fact. Like, really not to drop really. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Andrew Ball, who puts in a 5. He said, my flag didn't turn up, and you chaps were funding the money, and then it turned up. Hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait.
Hey, wait a minute.
Wait a second. What's going on? Also, by the way, like that actually happened, I think, a few times, actually. We were extremely lenient with our customer service, by the way, because some people did not receive their flag because it got lost or something like that. We were very conservative with it. We were like, okay, if you didn't get it, we just resent the flag, no questions asked, and that was the end of it. Because we're like, look, like we're not trying to like get into this whole thing of like, oh no, you got to rebuy it if it got lost. Like, well, no, you didn't get it, so just resend it. That's the bottom line. So that's what we did with all of them, by the way. But hey, he got a refund, and then it turned up anyway. Honestly, I think I told you to keep it. I think I remember having that conversation actually. But Enforcer, what say you?
I mean, I think it showed up like 3 months later or something like that. It was like an insane amount of time after it was ordered. So I mean, that's pretty fair. I mean, like that was the postal services issue, really. That was Newman in the post office going, I guess your flag was lost in the mail. But beyond that, I mean, still at the same time, we try and make sure to keep customer service a high priority here, the best we can, until someone cusses us out. And but still, thanks you for the support of the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You know, actually, when I had to resend the flags, I think I actually threw in a couple of extra patches in there. You know, the Enforcer flag patches. I actually threw a couple extra in there for the trouble because they had to deal with the post office and them losing everything, which I've had to deal with quite a lot. Which pisses me off quite badly. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Varney Ice, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Mr. Ice, for that $5 support, and we appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Taoist Auditor, who said, Taiwan falls in the Philippines, in the Pacific, Japan, Australia, etc. No more U.S. in the Pacific isolated. A good plan.
See, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that's a bad idea. And I think you completely agree with me there. You and me are on the same wavelength here. That's a bad idea. That's why we got to face them down. The Chinese are our enemy. And while we still have some significant trade relations with them at the moment, so completely cutting them off in that way would be destructive, we need to wean away from having significant trade relations with them. And if push comes to shove, we will end up facing them down, trade relations or not, over the situation with Taiwan. That's what I think our approach should be right now. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Plazoth, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Plazoth, for that support as well. He did not leave a comment, though, but we appreciate that very, very, very much. We also have a 2 from Hoodoo, who said, is the U.S.-UK special relationship over?
I'd hope not. I mean, it seems as though right now it's very strained, but I hope that there is a way to come back from this, because Britain is a great friend of the United States of America, and together we've done so many great things together. Incredible things, really. They got our cotton, we got their industrial goods. We helped them out in the First World War. They generally helped us out in trade and industrialization even further. We helped them out in the Second World War. They basically followed us around the world doing everything with us since then. I'd hope that it's not over, because Britain is a great and incredible country filled with amazing countrymen and citizens of the United Kingdom. And I'd have to say that I'm very proud to know that countries like Britain and the Britons are allies of ours. And so with that, I hope that has addressed that the best I can, and I hope that that would be the case in the future. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Chef Danny B. Once again, he puts in another $20 support. And thank you very much, Chef Danny, for that support once again. And he said, it's me again. And I think my new pet tortoise, Sonic, should run for president. He might do a better job. And best regards from the official chef of the LSA, Danny B.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Again, Chef Danny B. That's actually your 3rd super chat of the night, I believe. And you know, your pet tortoise, you might be able to do a better job. I mean, these days, with the kind of people we have in the government, I really do think a tortoise like that could do a better job than most of the elected officials these days. But I think
we already have one serving.
What is that, Mitch? What did you say? Oh, man, I'm so old, I can't. Okay, everybody, Mitch is just having one of his dissociative moments. It happens often. So, everyone's going to have to depart from the area, and we're going to have to let him trip and fall over nothing for the 90th time today. But anyway, see on the, oh, man, and then on the other side, oh, here comes Nancy Pelosi.
What's going on around here? Chocolate!
It's like, oh my god. It's like, can we get some younger people around here? Like, some people who actually got some energy? You know, like, is that too much to ask? Like, when you look at all these people right now in the Congress, they're like in their 70s. You know what people were saying about folks like that like 50 years ago? They were saying that people that old in Congress get eaten alive by everyone else because they're not quick enough on their feet. And I'd agree. I mean, like, they're not. And they generally just sit around collecting a paycheck and trying to run the system for what they can. It's ridiculous, really. But anyways, a big thanks to you for the support and with this channel to keep it running. Once again, Chef Danny B. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from SCR357, who said the U.S. Reaper drones use Xbox controllers.
Oh yeah, I remember. You know the submarines do too. Actually, like, did you know that, Matthew, that the submarines also use Xbox controllers?
Yeah, did you know that the Ocean Gate submarine also used Xbox controller?
Well, I don't think that was up to Navy standards. Like, I don't think that was up to the standards of the Navy. But yeah, you know, it's really crazy. They actually use a lot of those because it's they're fairly easy for people to get their minds wrapped around on how they work. It's really cool like that, actually. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and making this channel a reality and keeping it going. And also, I see some people saying Britain is sadly deteriorating. Oh, come on, Britain's fine. We went over there 6 years ago. And people were saying back then, oh, Britain's over, it's been defeated, it's done for. We went over there and it was fine. I mean, like, you know, it's like, the thing that's crazy to me is the reason why people say that, and I know that the whole speech thing's going on over there in the UK, and no one in Britain really likes that, and I know that a lot of Americans are not really big fans of that, but that's not really any of our business. That's more so y'all's. Our opinions don't really count on it. But the thing is that people always say, "Oh, it's the immigrants." It's like we went to Britain, and compared to the United States, there's
Man, you're getting on a bad topic. You're getting on a bad one.
well, I know people's opinions, but I mean, statistically, there's hardly any immigrants in Britain compared to America. So when you look at it and you go over there, it's like, what the hell are they even talking about here? I don't get it. But anyways,
We're getting into politics. Get into politics.
all right, well, I know, God forbid we tell some people that their whole entire notion of the world collapsing around them is made up. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
Our next one goes to Dan Brooks, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Dan, as well, for that support. He said, correction, I should have said IRGC, not Iran.
Oh, they're the same, really. I mean, the RGC is Iran, basically. So, I mean, you basically hit it on the nail anyways. But a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Putin Puppet, who puts in a 2, who said, Dutch and U.S. veteran pilots fly F-16s in Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. And I'd have to say that that's very interesting to know that as well. And a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope this addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from SCR 357, who said, underwater basket weaving, LSA.
What an interesting college degree, underwater basket weaving. I bet the employment rate on that one's high. But you say to you once again, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Hoodoo, Texas once again. He said, well, Saddam's in be Khamenei's. Can't read the last part, though.
Oh. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Bruce Lee, who said, look into how crazy the Chinook winds can be.
Oh, I know how crazy they can be. They can blow out windows. Like the Chinooks have this crazy downburst that they have from their rotor wash. It's insane. That's actually why I believe, if I remember correctly, they actually don't let them fly that low over U.S. cities and such if they have to fly over, because they would start blowing out people's windows and basically rupturing them from just the rotor wash. It's crazy, really. But I do thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 2 from Bruce Lee once again. He said, now you got to look into that Skeletor meme, LOL.
I think I know what you're talking about. I know who Skeletor looks like, but I don't know what he sounds like. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And Taoist Auditor put in a 2 and said, Enforcer should get the GTA 6 sponsor with more car chases included.
You know, that's interesting right there. Interesting notion. And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And we're on to the next one.
And with that, folks, it is now time to jump into our live chat questions proper. It's now that time of the night. And a huge shout out to you all once again for the support and the super chats, and we do appreciate that. But jumping straight into our Morse code decoders, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Nora Pritchett, Airbell Garbo, Aurelio Fluffness, Kush Kobe Tech, Cyan Brian Blairstown. And they said the Morse for tonight says it's the final countdown, and Iran is about to get a blasting. And that's going to be crazy. LLT, LSA.
And and that is the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail. And that is the Morse code message of the night. I get to congratulate you all greatly for keeping this channel running. It's an amazing and incredible thing. And it's a wonderful thing to know that folks like y'all in the Lee Springer Stone Corps are getting that correct time and time again. So a tremendous, humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into our live chat questions. But due to us going overtime, literally at this very moment right there, like literally exactly when I said that, we just went overtime. We're going to be getting 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream for the night. So we're on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, now this one is going to go to Tom Exman, who said, do you really think that Israel has a laser version of the Golden Dome operational right now?
They have the Iron Beam, and it works, but they don't have a lot of them, because producing those, from what we know, is done at a somewhat slower pace, because almost every country in the world, even the United States, is saying that our system, which I believe is called the Thor, will be fully functioning and operational within, I believe it's the Army at a minimum, by 2028, which is about 2 years from now. The British have said about 2029 for the Dragonfire, and I think some other countries that have their own laser-based air defense are also saying that it's going to take a couple of years for them to get those fully integrated into their armed forces. So they have them, it's just that they're not in incredibly large numbers right now. There's maybe 4 or 5 of them at the moment. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Sean Wilhelm, who said, I heard reports of Ukraine using military balloons to extend their drone range. And have you heard of that? I think you might have gotten that mixed up with Russia. Like Ukraine might have done that, but I've seen the Russians trying to deploy 4G and 3G balloons onto their airspace. So that way they can try to extend the range of their attack drones because they've lost Starlink. But maybe, possibly, it was Russia. I'm not sure. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think that was the Russians, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're speaking of the Russians, that's true, but I haven't heard of the Ukrainians doing such a thing. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be none other than AF Kaplan. He said, instead of making an announcement about mobilization, Mike Putler tried doing it without announcing it and simply snatching people off the street without any type of warning.
They probably wouldn't, because full mobilization will also require industries to switch over to wartime production, which would be easily noticeable to the public because, people who work in the factories, which is still a pretty big thing in Russia, would be coming home and saying our assembly line is stopped and they're converting it into wartime production. And then that would start to spread, and then they would know that they're in the process of a full mobilization. So they'll probably have to make a public announcement on that. And there's also probably going to have to be a great deal of official presidential decrees that require full mobilization to now take place. So it won't really be something that they can hide exactly, because mobilizations are a lot more, I guess you could say, broader reaching in consequence and impact to the citizenry than just a conscription. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much for watching tonight. We've had a peak viewership of 20,000 people here tonight at the peak, and 142,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many of y'all have always been considering this channel to be your primary source of news, and we hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short video to be made, the Enforcer of the Mat, Enforcer Matt, will be the one making that short war video tomorrow. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Haram Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all to the 142,000 plus people that joined us by the end of the stream. And we appreciate every single one of the viewers very much for being here every single night. And we will see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern to cover the rest of the news throughout the day. And it is high time to see if attacks are going to happen this weekend. With it being Friday, we're down one day. So we'll have to see if Saturday or Sunday is going to be it. We'll have to find out. But in the meantime, though, if it does happen, we will go live immediately whenever it does start to happen to cover that here on the stream, that is. But in the meantime, though, thank you all for joining us once again. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, get some rest, and good night.